Okay. Check one, two. Check one, two. Testing, testing. We are live again for the first time in I don't even know how long, guys. Probably like, what is it, like a month and a half? So please bear with me if I'm rusty with this. I had to rebuild an entire studio. I will give some updates. I moved, and that is why I was gone. I did mention that I was going to be moving. I was anticipating being out for 2 weeks. Instead, I feel like I was out for almost 2 months. It was not what I was planning on doing, but I appreciate anybody's patience with this. Um, yeah, but we're back, and we will be streaming with the usual schedule of once a week. It will be on Thursdays most of the time, and it might be able to actually be earlier because I changed time zones. It's just not earlier tonight. Um, so with that, um, some updates. Like I said, I moved. I moved from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas. It was an enormous hassle to do it, but we are finally settling in, me, my wife, and our daughter. And I'm very glad that we moved. It's nice to be outside of the city and be among nature and we're pretty far outside the city, so we're not in the city of Austin, and it's nice to be around nature again. I grew up in the desert and among all the wildlife that's out there, and there's so much wildlife out here. It's very cool to see it. There's thunderstorms again, and which I've missed from being a kid. It's nice to be outside of the city of Los Angeles. Grateful for my time there for about a decade, but it was definitely time to move. And like I said, it was much bigger hassle than I was expecting, and it took quite a while to get this place set up. It's still not completely set up, but it is completely set up as far as you can see, but not entirely yet. I was planning on building a whole new studio, but that um, did not happen yet. Eventually I will, but I have to know what I want to do. I don't want to just get rid of the old one because it's old. I feel like, some nostalgia. This booth, we brought the booth with us that's falling apart because new ones are very expensive. So, hope at least, to make this last a little bit longer. But eventually we'll revamp things a bit. I have a lot of plans to continue this year, and we'll talk more about them in the next stream. This one is kind of just a channel update. I almost, again, didn't go live tonight because I was setting this up, the final touches on it right before this stream, but I felt bad that I've left you guys hanging for like a month and a half or something like that. So we're going to talk about the Terrence Howard saga again, and it was not something that I was expecting to ever discuss again, but I watched Eric Weinstein's talk with him on Joe Rogan that happened in between my last stream about it. And I also watched Professor Dave Explains his YouTube channel. I don't think he has an actual PhD, which I don't have a problem with because I don't think that it necessarily always means that you are competent. But we're going to get into that discussion about academia and accreditation and what makes somebody, a valid voice in the scientific discussion. And so that's what we're going to talk about. If you have any questions, there is a live chat. You can ask me, pretty much anything. And if I want to answer it, I'll answer it. And like I said, this is going to be a pretty casual stream. I have other streams that I want to discuss that are much more in-depth and serious. There will be like the next few of them. But this one is just going to be pretty casual. And we're commentating on a discussion that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the discussion. I enjoyed it, but it's not a very rigorous, I guess, and focused talk about any one specific thing. And then we're also going to give some commentary on a commentary. So it's not going to be the most, uh, I guess, just focused stream. And it doesn't have to be. It's going to be kind of low key because I'm rusty. So, but if you have any questions, please comment them in the chat. If you have any questions for me and you're watching this not live, you can comment them down below and I'll try and get to them. Please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. I don't know what happened to my channel while I was gone. I have no idea how many people this is going to reach. Sometimes when people don't post for a while and then they go to, it just tanks engagement. Not that I have tons of engagement. But the few that are engaged are very engaged, and I appreciate every single one of you. But the we're not in it for the views, so whatever hits we took to the algorithm is what we took. So with that, like I said, please hit the like button and we will get into it. Looking and sounding great. Good. Yeah, let me know what the sound is like. Let me know what the connection is like. Everything is new. Even though it looks the same to you, it's not. It's very different. And I had a lot of soundproofing to do. This is not a room that is, very conducive to recording and streaming. But, it took a lot of work, but we are finally able to do it. So, what's up, trusted source? Brought back the brick wall. I did. I brought back the brick wall. I couldn't let go of it. I brought back everything. Everything came with me. So, with that, this is the discussion on Joe Rogan. It is episode 2171. 2,171. That is a lot of episodes, but it is between Eric Weinstein and Terrence Howard. If you watch this channel, then you are very familiar with Eric Weinstein, and you're probably familiar with Terrence Howard because he's an actor. And but he is also blown up recently because he is someone who does not have an academic background in the subjects that he is interested in, and something I understand. And also he is, very famous already for completely unrelated means, and then gets into, the discussions of fundamental reality, which if you don't have an academic background in that, a lot of people are going to start to call you crazy, which has been what has happened. So we're going to discuss that. But we're going to also talk about their talk because I think that it was great. I think it's good that people like Eric engage with people who don't have an academic background because especially right now, the very first stream that I did on this channel, the very first video that I uploaded, it wasn't live, but you can go back and watch it. And I think it's called Escaping the Academia or Escaping the Academic Establishment. And I don't want to be somebody that just rips on academia. I do have a lot of problems with it, with our entire education system. And it's not just out of spite. It's because I didn't enjoy most of my time in school, but that's not the point. The point is that this project that has become sentient singularity theory, and that I discuss on this channel, is about the structure of mind, and that is about the structure of about the process of learning. Okay, so you have to. It causes, when you truly study mind and you actually make progress, then you realize that our entire academic system, for most people, is not actually conducive to people advancing their own ability to learn. They don't actually learn things. We say they do because they've memorized things. And yes, those things are connected to other things, and those things are connected to other things, and those things are connected to other things that, you kind of know, and it seem to make sense. But for the most part, you are restricted to a desk, memorizing something, and then being expected to spit it out. And that is not learning. Learning happens through experience, and it happens during goal seeking. But that goal seeking has to be, I learned a lot in school, but not about, I didn't learn, I got a degree in finance. Okay, I was pursuing a degree in biology, and I kind of wanted to keep biology and zoology which was my main passion as a hobby, and I wanted to make more money. And so I went into studying finance. I got a degree in finance, realized I don't actually care that much about making money, and didn't pursue a career in finance even. So, but I did learn a lot. I learned by just going through the process of trying to get through all of school without actually having to just become a parrot. And also I made my life quite a bit more difficult than it needed to be. I don't think I did a single math homework assignment in all of high school. And that is not, I don't suggest that. But I learned a lot through that process of how to, deal with people. And I didn't have the GPA for a while, so I had to figure out other things that were extracurriculars that ended up making up for it in certain circumstances. And so, you can learn a lot on a journey that you don't expect to learn. But if you're going to learn about a subject that you're trying to actually learn about, then you have to have a goal in mind. And that goal has to be a good goal. And when I say a good goal, I mean objectively good goal that is relevant. It's like a specifically relevant goal. So if your goal in learning about cosmology is to try and figure out how the universe began, then that is a good goal. If your goal in learning about cosmology is getting a PhD in cosmology, that is not actually a good goal, because you're not actually pursuing what you need to pursue in order to actually experience the subject. You're memorizing a lot of things that are associated with the subject and said to be about the subject, at least, and you assume that they're accurate, but you don't really know because it's usually secondhand information. But you don't experience the subject. And experience, firsthand information, must be prioritized above secondhand information. It is how you actually learn something. So when somebody says, "Oh, I know that we went to the moon," most people don't actually know that we went today, especially. The people who definitely know that we went are the people who went. Okay, I'm not saying we didn't go. I believe we did, but some people think that we didn't, and some of those people are some of the smartest people that I know. And maybe they're right, maybe not. But the point is that it doesn't really matter, because you're never going to know. You're going to think or believe, but you're never going to know unless you actually went. Those are the people that know. And that's pretty much the only people that know. For sure, like completely know, and without any doubt at all. They have to assume that people went to the moon, because they are people and they went to the moon. But everyone else, especially those who were not involved in that process in some way that was, truly deeply personally involved, you don't know. And this is true of a lot of things. This is, I know so much about wildlife from personal experience, and I also have memorized countless more information than just, not even, that doesn't make sense, immensely more than I have experienced. But I have to know that what I know from experience, and I have to know what I think because I read it or someone else told me, and or I saw it on YouTube and somebody showed me a picture or something. And there's different levels of trust that you can place in different sources, but none of them are going to allow you to know something other than your own experiences. And so this is the main problem with academia today. And it is a completely, it is almost a completely totalizing issue. It's not, it is, there are very few people who actually experience the subject that they are in, even those with PhDs. There are people who are doing real research. And I'm not saying that they saying that they did research, and other people said they did research. I'm saying they are breaking ground and witnessing it in their own firsthand perspective. That is not actually very common in academia, not even among professors. And so this is something that I've become increasingly passionate about talking about, because it's not healthy for civilization or for a society to not acknowledge this. To think that you know something because you memorized it back in grade school while sitting in a desk is a big problem. It means you're prioritizing secondhand information above firsthand information. You don't even realize that you have to prioritize firsthand information above secondhand information, and it's causing issues. So we're going to talk about it because it comes up in the commentary by Professor Dave. So here, some of these clips are going to be from Joe Rogan's actual podcast, and some which is linked below, by the way. Professor Dave explains that YouTube channel. Dave, not the biggest fan personally, me, but he has a lot of information memorized, and he has some great videos explaining many different topics, and you should check out his channel. It is linked below, and so is the stream that we're going to be discussing, and so is the stream on Joe Rogan's channel is also linked below. So here, first thing, is this.
Or not incur the penalty that you're incurring. The penalty that you're incurring is when the rest of us work our effing asses off, and you come in and you say, I've developed, like, imagine if I got on this program and I said, is John Jones out there? He's a huge pussy. He doesn't know how to fight. I have a one-touch technique. And if I lay a pinky on John Jones, you're going to see a quivering little pat of butter. Sean Strickland has no disciplines. The guy's a big fatty. It's not going to go well.
No.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is, that's what you're doing to us.
I didn't mean to. That's not what I meant to do. But in me saying 1 times 1 equals 2, like I said, that's a metaphor that there's.
Okay, so here's what Eric is saying here is that Terrence is coming in into a field in which there are people who are accredited, who and Eric is one of them, who have put in an enormous amount of work and actually have like quite a bit of expertise on the subject. And to think that you can come in to this field and just start breaking ground and being accepted as equal is basically not realistic, essentially. And I understand what he's saying in certain subjects. That's true. The example that he gave is definitely true. I mean, when if you're going to talk about like MMA fighting or anything where there is a obvious result that is going to be apparent at the end, engineering, where you have to build an engine. Well, guess what? We're going to turn it on at the end, and we're going to find out how competent you actually were. We're going to put you in the ring with Mike Tyson. We're going to find out how competent you actually are. The problem is that, and this is I understand this is going to piss some people off, because that's exactly what Eric is saying, is that you can actually do this. It is very few people who can do this, and it's only for certain specific things. It's not like you can come in and just all of a sudden, you know more. You've never studied mathematics, but you're going to come in here and you're just going to, overturn all of mathematics and prove all these mathematicians who actually did break ground in not talking about necessarily just someone with a PhD. I'm talking about like somebody who is a known mathematician historically. You're not going to just override them. And that is true of a lot of people who have actually made serious progress and whose names we know because of it. But if you're going to do that today to just somebody who is involved with academia in some of these subjects in which nobody's actually able to test anything, like physics, okay, then that that's something that can be done by some people. I'm not saying Terrence Howard is doing it. I am not. I don't think Terrence Howard is crazy. I think Terrence Howard is very intelligent, and I think that he doesn't know how to talk about what he is trying to describe because we don't have the words to describe it all. I also think he's wrong about some things. I don't know what they are, but it doesn't matter because everybody's wrong about some things. I also think he's right about some things because guess what? Everybody's right about some things. But I think that it is clear to me that he is intelligent, and I'm not going to comment on whether or not people have, some people will say how arrogant of him to think this, and you have to be such a narcissist in order to come in and try and engage in some subjects like this without an academic accreditations in the fields that you think are the fields that would be necessary to engage in this, which they're not. And the reality is that, I mean, I'm doing that, so I can't really say anything about it. But also, if you think that you can do it, you should do it. And people can call you a narcissist all they want, but that's not actually a criticism. And so I'm not. There's no point in discussing is he a narcissist. That's a terrible discussion to have. It's a waste of time for everybody. So, but we should discuss ideas if you think that they're worth engaging with. And I think that Terrence, the idea that I think is worth engaging with, much more so than even Terrence Howard's ideas, specifically, a lot of them at least, is whether or not, or is how do we engage in scientific discussion that is serious with people who don't have academic accreditations. And that is something that needs to happen. And, like I said before, in certain subjects that have, which is a lot of things in academia these days, because like I said, it's so based on secondhand information. You can't actually know a lot of the things that you think you know, especially if you're a professor, because it means that you sat in a classroom most of your life. And that's not where you actually usually learn things. It's really not. And but the problem is that you think you know. And so you have this piece of paper that makes you assume to be an expert to the world. And there are certain subjects in which we can actually see your competence in it. Like I said, engineering or anything that has to where you're actually engaging with a real problem and you're actually solving real problems. But then there's other things like physics today, which is not actually that. Physics has become detached from reality. And Terrence Howard is trying to say this. It appears this to be the case, to me at least, that he has been trying to say this, and that he doesn't know how. But he is right. And Eric says the exact same thing, which is that physicists today have become totally detached from the physical world, and that they're not actually doing physics, and they think that they are. But really, they're doing like mathematical masturbation. And that's exactly what they're doing. And I'm not saying that the structures, the geometries that come out of the equations that are being, produced by people like Ed Witten and all, I don't know, all these string theorists are nonsense. I don't think that they are. I just don't think that I think that we don't know what those structures actually are. And I think that personally, according to my own theory, they have to do with the structure of information processing in mind. And I don't think that that's what is assumed by most of the accredited physicists in the world today. But the thing is that all of those structures, if they're not associated with anything that we truly know as something that we can interact with, it's just math, then that's not physics. And there's also no way for us to check whether or not you're actually making any progress. How do we know that string theorists are not insane? Because their math adds up? Okay. So does mine when I make a purchase with, cash. It doesn't mean that that we've actually that something novel or something involving physics has been done. It's not. You haven't tied it to the physical world. And Terrence Howard has also been saying this. And he says it like this.
Yeah.
Took a wrong turn when it walked down the road of relativity.
Okay.
If in abandoning the ether, and now they've walked down this road and now they realize that it's a potential dead end, but instead of turning around and saying, okay, well, let's use the luminiferous ether that all of these equations were built off of. And here a young man that's outside of the world has come in and said, okay, I have the wave conjugations that make up and prove the etheric nature, the etheric substance.
So
that's what I want to.
Jamie,
we got to walk
if we could bring
the
back
pieces.
the portal group page, I can sort of show what Terrence is talking about, what his geometries, how he relates them to the physical world. So if we could go up Howard's unifications claim.
Okay. So first of all, I think that it's important that we look up the term ether because this is it's very important. So ether. Definition. Ether, a very rarefied and highly elastic substance formerly believed to permeate all space, including the intersections, I guess. I don't know how to say that word, sorry. Between the particles of matter, and to be the medium whose vibrations constituted light and other electromagnetic radiation. Okay, so ether. It's also spelled EATHER. EA. So basically, what it means is substance. That's it. And that doesn't actually tell us anything. When somebody says the ether, it doesn't mean anything that it doesn't give us any context. It's just a placeholder term. And so I don't agree with Terrence exactly. With the term that he uses here. I actually think that he is on to something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought it up. And he is right that science has made this wrong turn, and we need to figure out what that term is. Some people, by ether, they mean spirit. And I would say that this is actually, if that's what he means, that's actually correct, largely, is that we have dismissed the idea that there is something beyond the physically perceived world, and that is more fundamental. And that is a huge wrong turn, actually. And you can't claim that it's not, because it has led to a dead end. We're making no physical progress. We're making equations that supposedly add up, but we don't know what these things are that these geometric structures that are coming out of it. We have no idea, or at least the people who are making these, they have no idea. You ask Michio Kaku, he will say maybe they're very, very small dimensions, these extra dimensions, there's 11 dimensions, and actually, some of them are very, very small. That makes no sense. And I've heard him say that before, when, you know, it was many years ago when I was watching him on Discovery Channel, and I loved everything he hosted. You know, futurism and all kinds of stuff. And I remember I would be like talking to people. I'd be like, you know, actually, like string theory is like it is, you know, explains all of reality, and actually, the world is made of strings. Don't you know? It's like, I didn't know that. I just heard that. Okay, but I thought that I knew it, and I told other people because Michio Kaku told me, and Michio Kaku doesn't know what those strings are, and he doesn't know what these extra dimensions are that are supposedly coming out of his math. This is this is no different than anyone outside of academia doing this is saying a bunch of things that nobody understands. That's exactly what physicists are doing today. They're doing exactly what Terrence Howard is doing. And I would actually say it's worse because, I'm not saying all of it's worse, because some of them, you know, have done great stuff, and but I would say most of the good physics that's being done today is not actually by people with degrees in physics. And it's being done by, you know, Lee Cronin and I'm not saying he's right about everything, but like it's they're Wolfram. I guess he does have I believe a degree in physics, but he's not a professor at and he's kind of branched off away from academia. All of this. My point is that a lot of this stuff is coming out from outside academia, or it's coming from fields that are not physics. It's coming from chemists. It's coming from biologists. It's coming from computer scientists, and it's coming from you know, even philosophers and things like that. It's not coming from physics. And hold on one second. The problem is that we can't check physicists because guess what? They're not building anything that we actually can see the results of. They're not. All of our tech is utilizing the same exact principles that we discovered 100 years ago, basically. Nothing new has really arisen in terms of like physics concepts that can then be tested and translated into, you know, physical, technological advances or physical demonstration. Nothing. And everybody just assumes these people know what they're talking about because they have a PhD and because they went to school for it. But they're really saying all this stuff that nobody actually understands. And guess what? Neither do they, because if they did, then they would have results to show, but they don't. And I'm not discounting their math. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not literate in the language of mathematics. That's all it is. You know, you can't say no, somebody isn't smart because they don't speak Spanish. Okay? If you don't speak math because you never learned it in depth, and you know, you can order from a restaurant, but like you can't engage in you know, even a normal everyday discussion, that's what I would be probably with math. And that's what a lot of people are with math if they're not they're not going to school specifically to get their master's in math or their PhD in math or their master's or PhD in physics. And if they do those things, then they do speak math, and that is an achievement. But it isn't really that much even of a sign of deep intelligence, any more so than speaking Spanish is a sign of deep intelligence. And not even that. I don't even want to say intelligence. I want to say understanding or expertise. That's what I will say. You can be. I'm an expert when it comes to. I mean, I would be an expert when it comes to the language of English compared to somebody that doesn't speak it. But compared to somebody who is an English professor, I'm, you know, nothing. But that's true of, you know, math too. And there's this assumption that if you understand math and physics, then you understand the universe on its deepest level. That's not true today. If that was true, then we would be making progress. Not saying it was never true, saying it's not currently true for the most part. And this is this it's almost worse when you do have a degree and everybody assumes that you're right, versus you don't have a degree, you're trying to use common language to describe things that maybe you're not doing the greatest job at it, but people are getting what you're trying to propose. At least somebody tells me, oh yeah, there's 11 dimensions. I don't even know what that is, and I actually understand dimensionality. Like I work on this stuff in a pretty rigorous way. I'm not a physicist, but I don't think they understand dimensionality that much, and a lot of them anymore. If you're going to tell me that there's 11 dimensions, I don't think that makes sense. You have to redefine dimension if that's the case. And to say there are 11 dimensions, we don't know what the other ones are, but we know what these 4 are, but we don't know what the others are. Then don't tell me there's 11 dimensions if you don't know what they are. That's pretty obvious, but we are so trained to accept secondhand information above firsthand information that you hear a physicist say that, and you actually start telling other people about it. I did that. I'm guilty of it. But I didn't know there was 11 dimensions, and neither does Michio Kaku. And that's obvious because we would know what those other dimensions were. I'm not saying there aren't additional dimensions. I'm just saying you have to, if you're going to say that there are additional dimensions or degrees of freedom. My definition in sentient singularity theory of a dimension is a perspective of a degree of freedom or a constraint. So it is the boundaries and the degrees of freedom that are formed by those boundaries of a system. That's what a dimension is. It's not that difficult, but it's been made really difficult because they tell you there's 11 of them. And there are videos all about, what would it be like to think in 10 dimensions? And that's not a very good question to ask necessarily until we really discuss what a dimension is and you actually observe a dimension beyond the ones that we currently understand as being maneuverable in physical space. So maybe there are additional dimensions, maybe they're not physical. I would be inclined to say that my work would support that. So, or maybe they're metaphysical. And so, but I would say that, yeah, science took a wrong turn when they got rid of the idea that there was something that was responsible for the existence of matter. And if you're going to call that ether, and by ether you mean spirit or sentience or mind or God, then I would agree. But if you're just using it to mean a substance, that doesn't cut it. You didn't say anything. It's the same thing as saying it's all energy. That doesn't cut it. It's all matter. That doesn't cut it. It's all mind, even. That does kind of start to hint at a different nature. It's not just a substance anymore. It's something with a nature to it that is, intrinsic and personal. But you could also say, it's all vibration. That doesn't mean anything either. To say it's all strings is the same thing as saying it's all vibrations. But if a New Age person says it's all vibrations, and if a PhD professor says it's all strings, we assume only one of them is crazy. But the public usually gravitates towards the person who's saying it's all vibrations because there's something intuitively understood about what they're trying to say that is due to our common understanding of the term vibration. Not saying it's the best term, but it's something that the layman can kind of understand. When people say it's all frequencies, it's all vibrations, it's all waves, it this is it's more intuitively understood than saying it's all strings until you actually start to discuss what their strings are, if there are strings. And I would say that it's not actually wrong to say that you can look at the universe from a certain viewpoint that would be that it is composed of strings. Strings of what? Information. Information informing someone and in a mind. There is no such thing as information outside of a mind. That's what is the defining characteristic of information, is that it informs someone. And so that is not what string theorists usually say, though, about these strings. They're just very, very, very small strings. And or even if that's a oversimplification, if it's not, I would say that the actual answer to that is even simpler. They're strings of information. But that doesn't mean that that is the end of that journey of either, because you have to think about what is information, and that will take you to places beyond the world is made of strings of information. But my point is that it's the same thing. Saying the world is made of strings and having a PhD is the same exact thing as going on Joe Rogan and being an actor and saying the world is all ether or vibration. I don't want to say ether because I know he said ether, but I'm saying ether as in a fluid substance. I think that is what he was kind of saying. But based on other things that he said, he might also assume that that means like spirit. I don't know. But ether, spirit. Let's see. Spirit. Greek mythology, it was the pure essence that the gods breathed, filling the space where they lived, analogous to the air breathed by mortals. This is like, even similar things are written into Abrahamic scriptures. Is the personification of the bright upper sky. So it is a spirit. It's a someone. Like, it's the personification. It's applying this personness to the substance that we are within. Is ether the same as spirit? Ether is another word for spirit, and it pervades everything. It is the most powerful of all the elements. Ether is the gift of creation, and alchemists try to force this by turning base metal into gold. I think that we don't understand what people even really meant by that back then anymore. But I'm not saying I understand it, but I don't think that it means exactly what people say it means. But this is, it means like the substance of spirit, the substance of sentience. So, that I would say is correct then, but it can't just mean like a fluid that is the fluidity of subspace, which that can be demonstrated, but that doesn't tell you anything. You can demonstrate that it's waves. You can demonstrate that there's a fluidity to it. You can demonstrate that there are strings that are directional and coherent, and you can demonstrate that there are bits of pieces of matter, quote unquote, and that none of that is any different from each other. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not fundamental. It doesn't give you any deep insights about on the surface, taken as is without extrapolating what that means. It doesn't give you any answers about the universe. And so, when people claim expertise because they have a PhD and they're saying something that nobody understands and you can't check it, and that they can't even check it, why are we taking them seriously? Or more seriously. I'm not saying we should not take them seriously. I'm just saying maybe we should also take some other people and some new ideas pretty seriously, because they're not making progress. So here. It's interesting. There was this clip that I had the timestamp of, and I think I pasted over it, but there was this clip where Terrence is talking about how there is no straight lines. Okay. And I want this to talk about like perspectives and dimensionality just for a second. Terrence is saying that there's no straight lines, and then actually I think I do have it. This is here. Look at this. Maybe this is it. But and Eric, there's only curves and circles, and Eric says no, there actually are straight lines. But I think that this is kind of I don't understand the focus of this argument because it's actually pretty common in the fringe physics conversations, I guess you could say. And here, this is something that I just noticed many years ago, and it's kind of interesting. So if you look at this structure, let me see if I have it, which is this structure right here. Let's just look at them. So I have something that I want to specifically show, but this is the structure. This Star of David, okay, structure. This six-pointed or six-pointed star, whatever you want to call it. These two intersecting triangles. It's made of straight lines. And if you look at this other structure that Terrence Howard is going to discuss, it is Flower of Life. It's like a simple version of it. Where is it? Like this structure. It starts with this structure at least. Basically, this. Right here. Open image in new tab. Okay. This structure and this structure are the same structure. They don't look like the same structure, but they are the same structure. And the argument that is being had by Terrence Howard and Eric, I guess, or the discussion that's being had by Terrence Howard and Eric, is over which one of these is more true. This one or this one. And that is not a very good discussion, and I'm going to show you why right now. So, there you go. This is the same structure. They're just looked at from two different perspectives. And this is kind of the issue with a lot of discussions today, especially in physics, is this problem right here is the mind versus matter problem. Is it all mind? Is it all matter? Which one is true? And we can get, but the problem is that you can't actually understand either, or I would say that you can't understand mind without understanding matter, because or you can't understand matter without understanding mind. That's what I will say. The reason for this is that you have a firsthand experience with mind, because you are a mind. You have an internal inside view constantly of what mind is. You don't have an inside view really of what matter is. You almost do, because like we can't experience matter. You can touch something and it appears like you have hit a wall. There is something there that you can't just override. And but what people don't understand in this discussion is that, and this is very relevant to the physics discussion, and this is why when we say ether, if it means spirit or mind, then I would agree that when we abandon this idea, really abandon the idea of God, I know Professor Dave is rolling his eyes if he's watching this at this point, but we'll get to that. Then you can't recognize that these two different concepts are two different perspectives of one experience. Okay, an experience is a mental experience, and it is a physical experience usually as well. And when we talk about mind, people often say, "Oh, they confuse the term mind and brain," but that's a big problem. Is you have a brain, you are a mind. Okay, and that's the difference. I talk about this on here a lot, as that before an episode, which I had to do, quite a bit of cleaning before this episode because this was a construction zone today. I clean up my space in here at my desk and in my office because it is your mind. It's not, your mind isn't just here. Your mind is everywhere. It is your entire experience, basically. But it is rooted in this internal, like, sub-experience, I guess you could say. But the reality is that it's all taking place in your mind. Everything that you touch, touching, this remote for the lights, I physically am touching that, but my mind is processing that information. And physics is just now starting to take this idea seriously again with, observer theory with Stephen Wolfram, which is that proposes that we perceive the physics that we do because we are the types of observers that we are, which is absolutely correct. It's very consistent with sentient singularity theory. And, Donald Hoffman's conscious agent theory, this is also, basically his proposal is that you start from consciousness and then you build the physical space. You build space-time, which is where we experience matter. And when you're talking about dimensions, or you're talking about the degrees of freedom or constraints of a system. And there's always two sides or there's 2 degrees of freedom in every I guess, concept, every conceptualization, I guess you would say. I'm really struggling to say this because I'm trying to explain this in a way that it's not specific to a certain circumstance. It's universal to all circumstances. And so I think that it's accurate to say conceptualization. There are 2 degrees of freedom in any conceptualization. There's dark and there's light. There is a straight line and a curved line, right? There is big and small and fast and slow and strong and weak. These are all dimensions of mind, due to the dimensions of mind, which is there's 2 degrees of freedom plus an intrinsic constraint plus an extrinsic constraint that forms the 4 that's why we perceive 4 dimensions of space-time, and that's why there's, we perceive 4 directions on a compass. That's why you see this concept of 4 chord songs and everything. It's everywhere because of this. It's because of the structure of your mind is organizing information that is around you into the same exact pattern again and again and again. And the context in which you're perceiving that information in its relationship with other, information and other people other beings is what just makes it different. So, um, the north, south, east, and west versus length, width, height, and um, uh, or um, and time. Basically, it's like length, width, height, and time, and north, south, east, and west are because your mind is doing the same thing in both circumstances. You're just putting yourself into a concept, and your mind is organizing the information, and it does it the same way every time because there is a set structure to thinking, and um, but this this concept of you can't see darkness without you can't define darkness without light. You can't define strong without weak. You can't define uh, um, big without small. Like these are mutual. They are dependent concepts. They're not mutually exclusive. Same thing is kind of true of mind and matter, and it's also it's true of straight lines and curved lines. Like it's just a concept, and if you look at this, it's the same structure. It's just what are you looking at? What are you connecting to make this structure? I mean, you can do this again, but uh, and just rotate it or something like that, and each one of them, and but you're always going to have things line up because these intersections line up where this is intersecting with this. This line's intersecting with this line. This line's intersecting with this line. Why? Because it's the same structure. You're just looking at it from two different perspectives. Are you looking at heads or are you looking at tails? Normally, with a coin, you can't look at heads and tails at the same time. But with other things like brightness, you have to look at both the concept of light and the concept of darkness. And with straight lines versus curved lines, you have to look at the concept of curved lines and also the concept of straight lines at the same time. You can't say, oh, it's all curved lines. Because what defines a curved line? The fact that it's not straight. That's it. So I just think that this is kind of like this is the free will versus determinism problem too. It's the same thing. You can't free will, aka choice. You cannot have. They are dependent concepts. They're not mutually exclusive, competing concepts. You cannot make a choice without determinism because otherwise it's not a choice. I have to if I have two paths and I know which way each one goes to the mountains, one goes to the ocean, I can make a choice. But if I don't know which way each of them goes and it looks like they go in this, both of them go into just nothing and I have no idea what's over there, I cannot make a choice. I literally cannot make a choice. And this is something I've been personally working on recognizing with my own self when it comes to like decision making and stuff. And there's a lot of this isn't just useless. This isn't a useless concept. This is something that can be one of the most useful concepts to understand and apply to your own life. You can actually do it because it allows you to recognize when you are stuck, not because you are being indecisive, but because you actually are looking at two things that you've labeled as choices, but they're not an actual choice. So, like I said, two paths and you don't know which way each of them goes. You can choose, okay, you can say, okay, we're going to choose to flip a coin. And if it is heads, then we go right. And if it's left, then we go, if it's tails, then we go left. By the way, both of those are heads and tails, and right and left are the same exact thing that I'm talking about. You cannot define right without also having left. This is your mind differentiating information. And there's no way to do it other than 2 degrees of freedom. People argue, there's a lot going on in politics right now. Obviously, the former president of the United States was shot this past weekend. And some other people were shot accidentally, and one person was killed. I mean, the whole thing is just horrible. but we're not going to talk about that. But what we are going to talk about is how there when you go and you start diving into political discussions in a more serious way, eventually you get to why is there only two parties? Why can't we have the Republicans, the Democrats, and the Libertarians, and the Green Party, and any other party? Why is it always in every single country the Labor Party and the Conservative Party, or it's really the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party? Because of exactly what I'm talking about. There's only 2 degrees of freedom in any conceptualization. And but a dimension is more than just a degree of freedom. It's a constraint. When you're looking at let's say you're standing in a hallway and you're like, okay, which way can I? What are the dimensions of this hallway? Is it the walls of the hallway, or is it the halls of the hallway? It's both, but some of those are constraints and some of those are degrees of freedom. So there's 2 degrees of freedom in a hallway. You can go that way, you can go that way. You can go forwards and you can go backwards. Again, 2 degrees of freedom. This is your mind breaking information into a binary in order to have differentiation and orient. But then you also have this duality of constraints as well, which is like a wall and over here and a wall over there, and a ceiling and a floor. And it's like these are just a binary. So when you're given a bunch of choices, let's say you're given a multiple choice test, you don't look at it and decide between the 4. You look at it and you decide between those 2 and then those 2. And even if it's a set of 50, you do this 25 times, where you're making a binary choice 25 times. That's actually what's happening in your mind when you have a set of 50 different choices. You can't actually choose between 50. You choose between 2. You do it 25 times. And this is just all due to mind, the structure of information processing within mind. You can't even start talking about this unless you recognize that there's that what is going on not in here, but like in you, which is the totality of your being, your environment, your body, and also your internal thoughts and feelings. That is a mind. Like, it's the totality of your space, I guess. That you can't start talking about how this is related to or explains even matter and also space and also time without recognizing that it's coming from mind, and aka spirit, aka ether. So maybe Terrence Howard is right, but I just don't understand why we would call it ether. Why not just call it mind? It's much more intuitively understood, I think. So I would. That's what I would say. Science has taken a massive wrong turn. You can't explain anything about physics without recognizing that this is all about mind. You just can't. And there's a culture in academia of denial of this. Good luck making progress. That is changing, and with people who are extremely rigorous, who are field jumping outside of their accreditations, and also people who are no longer working in academia and setting up their own things, like Eric or Stephen Wolfram, who, they do have accreditations, but they are not working really within academia. I don't even have accreditations in physics, but I don't have to, because guess what? If physics is about mind, then I have a firsthand experience and firsthand understanding of mind, and I recognize it. Everybody does, but it's just whether or not you like recognize the value of it and start applying it in these specific circumstances, whether or not it's going to be useful to them. But so now we're going to get to Professor Dave Explains in a minute once I look at the chat. What's up, memes? Personally, I like degrees of freedom. Yeah, I like the terms of, I like degrees of freedom. Nobody likes constraints, but the thing is that there are no degrees of freedom without constraints. There's not. There is no hallway to walk down without the walls and the floor and the ceiling. Imagine you took all of it away. You'd be floating through space with no up, no down, no direction, no a way of orienting, no directionality, and you'd just be going through space. You're not going anywhere, though. It is the walls, it is the constraints that creates the circumstances for us to perceive a degree of freedom. And you can't have a degree of freedom unless you perceive a degree of freedom. And this is something that I really personally had to this whole idea of how tied you are to your material experience and maneuverability is tied to your mind. When I moved, I really struggled mentally with just getting anything done and thinking about what I even needed to get done, because before my spaces were set up, before my office was set up, before our bedroom was set up, before my closet was set up, I was just very stressed and I was losing things all the time. And I would go places and then realize I forgot my wallet. I did that. I'd never do that. But I did it, a few weeks ago, because I don't have a place for my wallet anymore. I don't have my office set up where I can, where I know where things are. I'm supposed to be building things and putting up, blinds and building bigger crib for my daughter and a desk for my wife. And it took an exceptionally long time to do those things, much longer than it took in my last place, because I didn't even know where my tools were. Your environment is part of your mind. It's not separate. And everybody knows this. It's just, you have to, be honest with yourself about it. Here, so I think he was talking about world lines. He was, but he's also probably talking about world lines in that specific circumstance. I'm not doubting you. I don't remember specifically, but I do remember that he is spoken about it in many, many different discussions that, and I've seen a number of them where he just says nature doesn't contain actually any real, true straight lines. And I think that we shouldn't even be thinking about that yet. I'm not saying that there's nothing to that idea. I'm just saying first we need to understand the concept of curved, which means that you need to understand the concept of straight. And that you can't understand one and not the other. In sentient singularity theory, I don't know why I didn't bring this up earlier, the entire basis of my work is about how do you orient beyond relativistic space, I guess, or beyond relativity, or relativistic relationships, and the foundation of my work is built on this concept of the four primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. These are four completely entangled perspectives that cannot be separated. They are all, as soon as you know one of them, you simultaneously are able to perceive them all. If you know what is inside of something, then you know what is outside of it. And if you know what is inside and outside of something, then you know what is separate from something and what is one with something. Because if something is inside of something else, then it is, you're perceiving it as at least as also separate. And when you look at these things, just to bring them up for those who have not seen this. Like I said, I'm a bit rusty, guys, but here. Inside, outside, separate, and oneness, these are co-defining. Outside means separate from oneness. Separate could mean inside or outside of oneness. Oneness means outside and inside of like separateness almost, or like separate from separateness. It's like almost a combination of all of them. Inside means separate and oneness, or that's what it means. I mean, if and this helps you orient and understand things. Your cells are inside of you. They are separate and they are one with you because they're inside of you. And when we're talking about fundamental orientation, this is how you do it. There's no more bigger than or smaller than or faster than or brighter than or heavier than or lighter than. Those are all spectrums. They're relativistic. There is no clear, I guess, like you get what I'm saying. It's all just a sliding scale. But with this, it's not. It's clearly defined. Everything is very clearly able to be perceived and there is no blurred lines. I brought this up when these fundamental relationships or these primary perspectives really apply within the realm. They apply into everything basically, but they apply to the interactions and relationships of sentient beings that on a fundamental level, in which you're not talking about concepts of relativity, talking about the relationship between sentient beings that exists in a different space than physical space. It exists in relational space. And when we talk about, like, even in politics, we talk about there's a whole debate between, usually Republicans and Democrats, but about abortion. And it's like, is a fetus your body, or is it a separate body? Or is it a baby, in the womb, your body, or is it a separate body? It's both. Inside means separate and oneness. Okay, now we can actually have a serious discussion about this topic actually make progress on it. Nobody makes any progress on it because they're saying, is it curved lines or is it straight lines that exist? Is it your body or is it a separate body? It's like, oh, well, maybe we need to reframe things a bit. And now we can actually have a meaningful discussion and make some progress. Same thing with, and this reconciles a lot of endless discussions. I remember Eric Weinstein was saying he would not discuss the free will discussion anymore because it's just so endless and nobody makes progress and it's boring at this point. And I agree. But when you recognize that free will is dependent on determinism, and when you really understand cosmology or the reality, I guess, or existence, and I would say at least, or within the way in which sentient singularity theory proposes within the nature of and structure of a reality or of existence according to sentient singularity theory, you realize that there is no even arguing over this. Is it all deterministic, or is it do we have free will? Like you realize that that these are dependent concepts going all the way back to God choosing to create others. And we'll talk about that another day, but it's even more than just a concept of related to the conceptualization of choices, and it's for us. It's also it's related to the conceptualization of choices for everybody, including God. So it's very deep. But what it leaves you with is that there's no point in having that discussion. That discussion comes from asking a bad question, which really a bad question is a question in which there is no answer. It's like if they say, is a quarter heads or tails? And I'm not talking about like flipping a quarter and did it land. I'm talking about, is a quarter heads or tails? It's both heads and tails. There's a head side and a tail side. That's what is a quarter. That's what a coin is. So you can't ask, is a coin heads or tails? That's a bad question. The answer is not allowed by the constraints of the question, which means that there is no degrees of freedom for the question. So you're stuck. And this sounds to a lot of people sometimes, I feel like, as just, I don't know, to use the term that's I've heard some people use to describe my focuses and work, esoteric, or basically vague and meaningless, is what they're trying to say by that. And that's not true at all. It's related to understanding how to ask what is a good question. I mean, that is related to everything. It's not everything has to be. If you want to, if everybody wants like the answers to the life, the universe, and everything, right? And that's in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when they're like, they create the AI, the super AI God mind, and then they just ask it the question of what is the answer, and it's like, to what? And they're like, to life, the universe, everything. Deep thought is the name of the technological, the AGI, or the technological sentience, basically, intelligence that they're asking, super intelligence. And it's like, go away and come back and I'll tell you. I got to think about it. And they go away and they come back and they're like, okay, what's the answer? And he's like, 42. And it's, what do you mean 42? And he's like, well, I mean, I just kind of picked a number because you asked a bad question. There is no answer. So I'm just giving you a nonsense answer. And I actually think that there's a lot of depth to that answer that was given of 42, but for another stream. But the point is, that's funny and true, is that you have to, it's highlighting, you have to ask the right questions if you're going to get answers. You can't ask questions to which there is no answer and get an answer. And so, the reason why if you want to deconstruct why that's a bad question, to go off on one more tangent, it's built into the structure of the question asked, because they're saying, what is the answer to everything? And they're not asking, what is the answer to this question? They're using that term answer as the question, basically. So it's a problem, because basically you have, and here's going back to degrees of freedom and constraints. It is a question with no constraints. Guess what? That makes it a question with no degrees of freedom, which means you can't move. You're stuck. There's nowhere to go. And this is why constraints are good. They actually allow us to move. So yeah, I mean, you can't actually have degrees of freedom without constraints. Now, I hope that made sense. If you like that and it made sense to you, please hit the like button. It really helps. But here is the Professor Dave Explains clip.
Beyond.
I know this has been long, but that's all right. It's our first stream back.
Been listening. I was not so happy with certain things that happened in the podcast. Then I started hearing the response to it. And I was much more infuriated by the response than anything I heard in the podcast, because I thought that a lot of people just use their position of greater formal education in some of these areas to be jerks and to be really just and pretend that they couldn't understand things that you were saying.
This will set the tone for the conversation. That Eric is more offended by educated people correcting the insane gibberish that Terry spews than the actual insane gibberish that Terry spews. Tells you everything you need to know about who Eric is and his motivations for appearing on this program.
But they
Actually, what I would say is that Professor Dave Explains, or Dave, we'll just call him Dave, was just the perfect example to prove exactly what Eric was talking about, or to show exactly what Eric was talking about, is that people are using their academic accreditations and their I guess knowledge, scholastic knowledge, as just tools to hold over someone's head and be an asshole, be a jerk. And this is kind of like the whole shtick for Dave. And I'm not saying he doesn't have any value. I actually would love to have a conversation with him if at any point, but as long as it's not on Twitter, because that he is especially rude on there. And maybe it's an actor for engagement or something. Maybe it's not, and maybe it's actually just like how he feels about like he does feel that strongly about all this stuff. And I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. But the point is that it's still just being a jerk, because you claim that you're educated. I mean, he literally said it. He's like, educated people, are calling out that Terry is a crazy person, and that's that. He's a moron, basically. That doesn't mean anything, and neither does your education. It doesn't, not intrinsically. It could end up mattering and meaning something to you because you're able to use what you've learned in that, but that doesn't, it's not intrinsically valuable. And there is no reason to be a jerk. And here's what I'm going to struggle with on this episode, and I'm going to say this up front. I had this phrase that I came up with from my time working in like the political world a little bit. And I eventually realized that if you chase a chicken with its head cut off, you become a chicken with its head cut off. What that means is that if somebody is just running around not without a goal, and all you do is chase after somebody without a goal, then you will become exactly, you're not being any more productive than them. You're just doing the exact same thing. You see this in politics all the time. You just somebody you think something's crazy, and then all you do is just focus on the fact that like that thing is crazy. If you think someone's genuinely crazy, you shouldn't engage. You shouldn't engage, especially if you're not explaining why you think that they're crazy, quote unquote. But you can't explain why you think they're crazy if you think that they're just crazy. That just means they make no sense. That's what crazy means. It means they make no sense. And that's not an argument about anything, because there's no context to it. You don't even have anything to back that up. I mean, Terrence Howard. I'm pretty sure he's like married and has, he's a very successful person. There's nothing in his life that suggests that he is insane, other than he's saying things that nobody understand, that a lot of people in academia don't. I don't even want to say they don't understand it, because it's that, because part of that is the case, but it's that he's using terms that they don't yet. To bring here, I will say this too. This past weekend was the Republican National Convention in the United States, and a woman who was Sikh got up and gave a speech, I guess. I don't know who she was, but I didn't watch it, but I saw the clip of her praying. And in it, she puts a scarf over her head, and then she says this prayer in Hindi, maybe. I don't know what language it was, but she used a term that in the whatever language it was that the prayer was in, that when translated means "good Lord." And when you translate the entire prayer, it sounds like the Lord's Prayer, basically, in the Bible. And before she read it, she covered her hair and then basically said the Lord's Prayer. And I saw so many Christians basically saying that she prayed to a demon in front of everybody, and they should have never let that, Satanism into like the room. And it was the same type of reaction. And the reason why is because it's the same. It's the same problem. If they actually went and they understood that Sikhism is a monotheistic tradition, and that all true monotheistic traditions that have the same definition of God, basically all worship the same God. And you can call it by different names, but that's still the same God. And they were focused on the fact that she didn't say God. She said whatever term they say in the language that, she was speaking, basically. And they didn't focus on the fact that she basically said the Lord's Prayer and covered her hair before she prayed, which is, all of this is listed in the New Testament, in the Bible, as being like what you should do. Jesus says, this is how you should pray. And it says and then he says the Lord's Prayer. And there are people who, and then there are who didn't even care about that. And then and look into that. And then you have her even acting in a manner that was specific and also instructed and praised in the New Testament, in the Bible, which is that a woman should cover her hair before, praying in public. And she does this. And nobody saw any of that. They just looked at one word and they were like, oh, that word is not the word that I use, and therefore these two things different, and therefore that bad. That's what they did. And that's exactly what people do, what a lot of people in academia will do to people like Terrence Howard. They will look at just the terms, and they will ignore what the terms are, how the terms are being used. The reason for this is because, like I said, all of education, most of education today, is about prioritizing secondhand information. All that does is allow you to memorize. If that's the case, then if this term is not this term, and you're not using these terms, then you do not understand. You don't know. I know, because I know the terms. Here's the thing. Context is information. Information is context. There is no information outside of context and information inside of context. Context is information. Information is context. A term, what something means, comes from its relationship with other terms. It comes from the whole picture that is painted by these various points, relational points that are being, projected by within a sentence, within a statement. And you're in this meta space of information processing of your mind. You have to look at all these different things, in order to get an understanding, a true understanding, not a memorization, but a true understanding of what's going on. You don't understand what's going on if you're just going to argue about you didn't use this term. You have to figure out what that term means in relationship with these other terms. You have to look at the whole picture of the entire concept that they're proposing. And people are lazy. And not only are people lazy, they've lost the ability to know that they're not thinking, because they have been trained by our education system to memorize things and sit in a desk And that is not learning. So yeah, I think that we have it is right to be critical of our current education system and not just accept the expertise of the accredited. Like, they have to demonstrate their expertise, and if they can't demonstrate their expertise to you, or you're not expert enough, or you're not understanding enough, you don't have enough understanding of a subject to understand that even when somebody can demonstrate results, then you shouldn't even be paying attention to the subject in the first place, and or the experts. You shouldn't take their word, the word of anybody that these people are experts. You should recognize that you don't know. Maybe you're just gonna gamble. That's fine, but like, you don't know. So this is going to be the theme, but I'm trying to explain what is the problem, not just attack Dave. Okay, I'm obviously using him as an example because it's the perfect example. Even though it's funny because he doesn't have a PhD, I don't believe, but he calls himself Professor Dave, and I don't have a problem with that, like I said. But there is, if that means all of this is self-taught to himself, like, he didn't learn all of this stuff in school that he thinks he knows, and a lot of it he's memorized, and he has memorized a lot. I mean, the guy is very intelligent. He has a talented mind, and it can store a lot of information, more than mine, it seems. But that's not enough. So I'm not trying to insult him. That would be chasing a chicken with its head cut off.
Number two, a prime number, when it's clearly a composite number.
And of course, he immediately explains that it wasn't a metaphor at all. He just can't do basic math. No, Terry, 2 is a prime number because it's a number that is only divisible by 1 and itself. How would it be a composite number? What are its factors? 1 and itself? Yeah, that's the definition of a prime number. Off to a bad start.
2, it does belong as a prime, but it is also special. And in other words, I have the opportunity to strawman you if I want to, because what you just said sounded crazy.
What Terry said was objectively crazy, and Eric should be telling him that he's clueless. There is no strawman. Terry is pretending that 2 isn't a prime number, and it objectively is. Eric, at the very least, confirms that 2 is a prime number. There's nothing special about it other than that it is a very small positive integer. It's not large enough to have factors other than 1 and itself. Same with 3. Only once we get to 4 do we have a number that's large enough to have a factor other than 1 and itself. It's not that hard to understand.
If you say 1 times 1 equals 2, everybody knows that that's crazy. But what you actually may mean, and the fact that you don't use certain terms, or the fact that you use certain pronunciations that communicate to me something very positive, which is that you taught yourself. You learned this stuff from reading about it because nobody taught you, or you wouldn't pronounce certain words the way you pronounce them.
Eric is saying that 1 times 1 equals 2 is crazy. He is saying that Terry can't even pronounce the words he uses. So why are we having such a hard time admitting the bottom line here, that Terry is crazy and has no clue what he's talking about?
Marie von Franz, who argued about the problems associated with the identity principle. You got Kurt Gödel, who talked about it. You got Wells. All of them said it made everything incommensurable just because they gave that identity principle to the number 1. And that has been the stumbling block for mathematicians because it's what's held everybody behind, because they keep trying to make that work. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you're wrong if we do it that way. I mean, in other words, I can take...
Is anything that he's saying correct?
Terrence has several influences, which, again, I don't think it's clear to me.
This is why Eric does not belong here. I will give Joe credit for asking point blank whether anything Terry says is correct. He genuinely wants to know. The answer is no. He has no clue what he's talking about and just spews word salad that doesn't mean anything. Terry has no clue what Gödel did or any other mathematician or what any principle means. The person in Eric's position is supposed to say no. Nothing he says is correct. End of story. But he doesn't do that. He feigns charitability to gain fans.
I don't have an issue with multiplication either.
Well, then 1 times 1 is what?
1 times.
Okay, so yeah. What's funny is that Dave has created this like straw man of Terrence Howard, which is that this idea that there's no context to anything that he's saying in which what he's trying to say has any basis in anything that is accurate or anything that is true. and that he's just crazy. And that is, it's very easy to attack somebody when you've just created a straw man of them. And I'm not trying to create a straw man of Dave. That is what he said here, is that you're not even supposed to try and understand what Terrence is saying, because what he said is just clearly crazy, apparently. And I don't think it is. I mean, I think that I see something there that he's trying to say. And he's using terms differently than the establishment, and because I don't think there are terms to describe exactly what he's talking about. But clearly 2 is a unique prime number. It is the only even prime number. And that's basically what I think he was trying to get at. And there is a reason why he's trying to get at it, and he believes that it's rooted in something that is far deeper about probably the nature of reality. And I don't know exactly what his perspective of it is, but I would say that to believe that there's something deep about that, about that the nature of the number 2 being, that's funny, being a prime number and being even and being unique is, and different from all the rest of the primes, is something related to something about the fundamental nature of reality. I would absolutely say that he's correct about that. And I don't have the right words for it right now exactly. Maybe I will later in the stream. But I mean, I've thought enough about this stuff to know that intuitively that is absolutely correct. But here's the thing. I don't even need to go and watch Terrence Howard explain on another podcast what he means by identity principle and what he means by 2 is a composite number. I don't need to go watch that. Why? Because I've used the context of how he's using the words that he's using in this current discussion in order to interpret the fact that he is saying something that that he's highlighting a true structure. But I'm not paying attention to the terms. I'm paying attention to how they're connected. So when he says 2 is not a prime number, 2 is different. Okay, well, is 2 different from all other prime numbers? That's the question. If you're going to figure out, is he recognizing something that is there? We have to ask not, is 2 a prime number according to the definition of in the dictionary? And it is a prime number according to the definition in the dictionary. But you also have to ask, is 2 different from the rest of the primes? Is Terrence crazy for calling that out? No, it is true. 2 is different from the rest of the primes. It is the only even prime number. That is interesting. And when we think of what does it mean for something to be even, it means like it's like dual-sided. It's like, maybe that sounds kind of like composite, like I'm not saying he's using the terms correctly. I don't think there is a correct way to use a specific word. There is a correct way to relate terms. So I've said this before, is where you could say, people ask me once, do you believe in the supernatural? And I said, that depends on what you mean by the supernatural. By supernatural, do you mean that which doesn't exist? Or do you mean that which does exist but is currently beyond the bounds of materialistic scientific understanding? That's which of those definitions do you supernatural do you mean? And they said that I was just playing word games, and that I didn't want to answer the question because I was just being evasive because I believe in nonsense, and they were trying to make me admit it. But I'm not going to fall for that, because I know that there's only 2 degrees of freedom in any conceptualization. And so I can choose either one, and it still works. But we have to choose one and commit to it. So I will answer the question, but you tell me. You ask the question, what does it mean what does supernatural mean? You tell me what that means, and I will tell you whether or not I believe in the supernatural. But the problem is that one of those definitions basically means like that which doesn't exist to them. Like they use that term to mean that. So if I say, yes, I believe in the supernatural, then they're going to say, oh, wow, look, you're crazy. You believe in that which doesn't exist. But I got them to face it. And they realized that I don't think they were trying to trick me or anything like that. I think that they'd never experienced somebody contextualizing how absurd that question is to them. It's not as absurd of a question if you're asking somebody, and then the reality is that they do believe that there's something beyond true that does exist in, and is real, that is beyond the understanding of materialistic science. Okay. But if you believe that could be the case, then you're not going to call that person crazy. But if you don't believe that that's the case, then of course you're going to think that they're crazy. And so I didn't fall into the trap that they had basically set, but I don't think that they set it intentionally. I think that they're trapped. It's not that they set a trap for me. It's that they're trapped. And to ask that question of me and have me answer it with a yes or no, that's me being trapped too with them. And I wasn't going to be trapped with them because I understand that there's 2 degrees of freedom, and plus an intrinsic constraint and an extrinsic constraint. And I applied it and I recognized this. And it kind of broke their whole game plan. But the thing is that what is there is no objective definition to the supernatural. You can pick either one and still have a completely coherent conversation, but you have to pick one and commit to it, and both of you have to agree that this is the definition that we're going to use. And that is not what Dave is doing here. Dave is just saying, you used words that I was not told to use, and therefore you are crazy. That is crazy. That almost it's not. I don't want to just call it crazy. I want to explain why it is nonsensical, and I'm trying to do that with the example that I just gave about that when somebody said, "Do you believe in the supernatural?" That person was trapped because they didn't even realize that the way in which that they had trapped themselves, basically, and that it was a trapping question. It was a bad question. It traps them too. It means that they can't get an answer. I mean, why would you ask somebody, "Do you believe in this?" And then when the person responds and says, "Okay, but can you define that? And then I'll tell you if I believe in it." And you say, "No, that's not how this works. You have to go by your definition." Like, no. You're asking me the question. I can't go by my definition of the supernatural and give you a real answer because you are asking the question, which means you have to set the terms of what that show and define you have to define the actual question that you're asking. You have to give it context. They didn't want to give it any context. They wanted no constraints on the answer. They were like, "No, you come up with or they wanted no constraints on the definition. They were like, "You come up with the definition, but you answer the question, but you come up with the definition." No. That's not how logic works. And this is basically the same thing that's happening with academia and people like Terrence Howard, and even there a lot of people's interactions with me. But I recognize this because of the specific nature of my work on sentient singularity theory. Pretty early on, at least, I recognized this, not right away, but early on, and it did make me try to be especially rigorous and precise when it came to communicating about these things, and that sometimes really is great, because sometimes that if you can do that, actually, then it allows for you to have conversations and ask questions and get answers that you wouldn't normally, that you hadn't been able to get before. But sometimes it also just pisses people off because they want a specific answer that already back justifies their position on it. They're not genuinely asking to have a conversation. They're asking it as an attack because they want you to say something so that they can just write you off as illegitimate. That is exactly what's happening here. And hope I'm doing a good job of not chasing a chicken with its head cut off and actually like giving you some value. But I hope if Dave is watching ever on any of this explanation, he, is humble enough to just think about what I'm saying. Dave can be a dick. Dave can definitely be a dick. Everybody can be a dick sometimes, so I'm not trying to like just call Dave a dick, because everybody can be a dick. But I've been a dick. But Dave is a dick a lot, and it's not a good look. It might generate engagement, but it's also counterproductive to what you claim to be defending and claim to value, which is like the pursuit of truth. I would imagine if you're such an advocate of scientific process, then and you're so, I guess, interested in scientific progress that we've made, you should be somebody who values meaningful interactions, not just name calling. But when he says things like Eric is the wrong person to engage with Terrence Howard on Joe Rogan, because Eric should just sit there and say, Terrence is crazy, and I have a PhD in math, and so I'm telling you that Terrence is crazy. Should you even accept that? Should that be Eric's job? That's why he's the wrong person to go on Joe Rogan and talk to Terrence Howard, because he's not just calling somebody insane, and he's actually trying to figure out what Terrence is trying to say. Like, that is, I think Eric was the perfect person to engage with Terrence Howard. And it was not his job to just go on there and call him an idiot and make fun of him because he didn't use the same terms. That is literally useless. And it's also cruel, and it's being a dick. And you shouldn't be a dick. Dave debating flat earthers on the quartering was so embarrassing. Dave could not have had less class. I mean, I'm sure Dave has plenty of good moments, but I think that it'd be nice if he was a little bit more nice. Not only would it be nice, it would actually be more constructive. His smugness is so gross, I cringe every time I hear him trying to school somebody. We're going to talk about that on here, but a bit more. Just another thing. Not trying to, again, focus too much on just like insults, but this is not the goal of any constructive discussion.
Terry already that he had been speaking metaphorically, but now he's going back to defending his inability to do basic arithmetic. It's beyond pathetic, and he should be publicly humiliated for insisting on this idiocy over and over again. Eric gives a lengthy monologue about how one such arithmetic contradiction would ruin all of math, but he doesn't assert that this is how we know Terry is wrong. Terry has no ability to even make a coherent comment.
Some forklift guy hits some strut, and the entire warehouse goes. That's what you're dealing with the principle of explosion.
And that's the problems with the identity principle that they've been trying to work on for years. For years, Norman J. Wildberger talks about it. It is what's because you have to cancel conservation of energy, and you have to cancel the action and reactionary laws.
This is a pattern. Terry knows he has no clue what he's talking about. So what does he do? He drops a name. Norman J. Wildberger. Who is that? What does he say? What did he do? No attempt to elaborate. It's just a name drop to pretend he's part of a grander discourse. He isn't. Then, of course, he deflects to concepts in physics like conservation of energy, which are not relevant whatsoever to the pure math he's trying to discuss. This is all he can do to deflect from his terrible math.
$1 times $1.
Okay, everything that I don't want to say everything that Dave just said is wrong, because that's what he says. I mean, I can say everything that if somebody says something wrong and that's all they said, then you can say what he just said is wrong. You can say everything he just said is wrong, even. But I think actually I misquoted Dave. I think he says everything that Terrence Howard says is wrong, which is different than said is wrong. Obviously, everybody says true things and everybody says false things. But here's nothing constructive was just achieved by what Dave just, by Dave's comments just there, because most of them are just name calling and insults and claiming that somebody should be humiliated. Oh, because, by the way, because that's the best way to encourage people to pursue truth and think for themselves and actually try and understand something, is to publicly humiliate them when they get it wrong. That's really, like, that's wrong, guys. That's really wrong. You have to be grace-giving to people who are wrong. If you think they're wrong, you have to be kind to them and you have to give them grace. And you don't just humiliate them, because you're training. Again, like Dave, a lot of his comments really suggest this perspective that comes from our education system, where it's just punishment, reward, and it's all out of context of it's all separated from the context of what is supposedly being studied. You are rewarded with good grades. You're rewarded with bad grades. Did you actually do any, anything other than, I don't know, remember a recipe, which is all that math is really when you're tested on math in school. You're just did you remember the recipe? Did you remember the formula? And nobody really explains in these classes where these formulas come from, because the teachers who are teaching it, they themselves just are regurgitating information, and they learned it from people who are just regurgitating information. And it's very, very few people in the very most rigorous and self-motivated little mathematical discussions that have happened throughout the ages, that those are the only people that really understand why the Pythagorean theorem it works initially, at least. I mean, you can go back and try and figure out why it works now, but to understand what you were even trying to construct in this it's not how people view math when they're taught it in school, and it's not how Dave seems to imply he understands math. I'm not, this is one clip, but when Terrence Howard is saying a lot of the things that he's saying, I think he's making actually quite a bit. He's suggesting quite a bit that he is perceiving issues that are real and that are there. So, and obviously, and this is chasing a chicken with its head cut off, is to be Dave is just saying things like, oh, Terrence pretended, and it's just name calling, and it's assuming motive, and it's all these projections onto Terrence, things that you cannot know, because guess what? You're not inside of Terrence's head. And if you're going to engage with somebody, you have to assume that they're genuine. Otherwise, you should stop engaging with them. And I don't know if Dave is genuine or not, if he doesn't realize that he's not actually saying anything, or if he does and he doesn't, or he just doesn't care and he is just, gaining engagement. I don't know. And I'm not really going to speculate on it much. But I will just say that the things that he's saying, if taken at just face value, and you assume that he really does believe that everybody who's wrong is not just wrong, they're an idiot and a moron and a fraud, and they should be publicly humiliated no matter what. If they're an idiot, they should be publicly humiliated, or if they're a fraud, they should be publicly humiliated. Fraud is not a person. Idiot is not a person. Idiocy is a moment that everybody has sometimes. Genius is a moment that everybody has sometimes. There are not geniuses and idiots. He says, oh, Terrence Howard thinks he's a genius. I don't know if he does or not, but the point is that that's, even if he does, that's not correct. It's not a correct, not because he's not a genius, but because no one is a genius. And But it's not right to say he's an idiot either, because no one is an idiot. Idiocy is a moment that everybody has, including Dave, probably more often than he believes. And genius is also a moment that everybody and anybody can have. It's not restrictive. And fraud is an action that somebody takes. It is not a person. Everybody lies. Everybody has lied. And that doesn't mean everybody always lies, because nobody always lies. And so to call, I mean, we've talked about Dave before and his claims of, everybody who is, believe, I don't know, like when he's talking about Stephen Meyer and those guys. And I don't even agree with a lot of Stephen Meyer's logic, even though I actually agree with him, theologically. But that doesn't make him a fraud. Like, it's not helpful to call people that, because it's not true. It's never true, actually. It is actually wrong to say it. Not just wrong because it's mean, but it's objectively wrong. It's illogical, nonsensical, and it's idiotic. Actually, it is a moment of idiocy to call someone an idiot. It is. And I'm guilty of it. So, like, not trying to be holier than thou. I'm guilty of it more times than I could possibly ever count, and I'm sure I will be guilty of it again. But right now, I can, state what is true, which is that idiocy, there is no one who is an idiot. Their idiocy is a moment. And when you call somebody an idiot or you call somebody a genius, it's you're wrong. You are always having a moment of idiocy when you say that. Now you could get into it and say, what do you really mean by that? It could mean when you say, oh, that person's a genius. Elon Musk, he's a genius. It's like, no, he has many moments of genius, more moments than most that have at least been relevant to him starting companies, and the technology companies. He's had many moments of genius. Okay. Some people have more moments of genius than others, but everybody has some moments of genius, and everybody has some moments of idiocy.
He's going back to defending his inability to do basic arithmetic. It's beyond pathetic, and he should be publicly humiliated for insisting on this idiocy over and over again. Eric gives a lengthy monologue about how one such arithmetic contradiction would ruin all of math, but he doesn't assert that this is how we know Terry is wrong. Terry has no ability to even make a coherent comment.
The fact that Dave doesn't understand what's even going on here is it's just telling to and who actually should be involved in this discussion. Eric is not using the term explaining, that he's not talking about what he's talking about in order to showcase that Terrence is wrong. That's not what Eric is doing. Eric is actually explaining why Terrence's claims are being so attacked. And it's that certain things that he has said and certain things that he believes would undermine the foundations of scientific consensus and this the tower that we have built of stacked theories. This theory is built on that theory, is built on that theory, built on that theory, built on that theory. So we know all these things, and it's all just balancing on that one theory at the bottom of this, talk of conservation of energy, or of causality itself. It's like you're now if you pull that pin out, and you say conservation of energy is wrong. Basically, you're saying everything that we've learned is wrong. That's what Eric is saying. It's not about telling Terrence that he's wrong intrinsically. He's saying that it is also suggesting why the interpretation of what people believe Terrence is saying, at least, is might be wrong, because it would invalidate and go against this mountain of context and evidence and causality that we have corroborated and that we utilize and rely on. And it seems to serve us in the contexts in which we use it. And he's right. That's true. That's why you have to recognize that you can't just change the meaning of a term when you're going into these discussions, though. You have to recognize that our established narratives throughout society do require us to keep a coherence to the definitions of things and the context of words, which is really what a definition of a term is. And you have to keep that consistent. So you can come up with a new term for what you're trying to describe, but you just change that, then the terms, then that's it. But it's hard to just come up with new terms. So people try and use terms that are kind of similar and give an intuitive understanding of what you're trying to say, but it's technically wrong. I guess it's technically wrong if you accept the definition of the consensus or of the mainstream, and that's fine. Like I said, what defines something as right or wrong is not a term, it's how you use it. So, but we can say, okay, we're going to say that we're not going to change the terms that we've currently agreed upon. So now we have to come up with a new term. And Eric gets into this in this interview and basically says that, we're going to tarry something, I forgot the context of it, but instead of multiply something. And I said this in my last stream about this, about Terrence Howard going on Joe Rogan the first time, is that I said, maybe we don't call it 1 times 1 is equal to 2. We say 1 grow 1 is equal to 2. And because if we change if we say, okay, yes, 1 times 1 does equal 2. What we've done now is we've changed the definition of times. And now everything else has to change. That's what Eric is saying. And Dave doesn't even get it. He's just focused on the fact that Eric has not called him a moron and not elaborated at all. No, you should elaborate. This is thinking. Terrence is thinking. Eric and him are having a conversation, and it is a tough one because they come from very different terminologies. But Eric is doing a great job, actually, like an amazing job. That's a very difficult thing to do, is to see past the semantics. It's like saying, I don't believe in Allah, I believe in God. Jesus was not the Messiah, it was Jesus. Stop. You need to see past the semantics here a little bit. It's a very simplistic example, obviously, but that is exactly what Dave is doing. And it's literally pointless.
This guy hits some strike.
Okay. Here, when he's saying this, look, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
And the entire warehouse goes. That's what you're dealing with the principle of explosion.
And that's the problems with the identity principle that they've been trying to work on for years. For years, Norman J. Wildberger talks about it. It is because you have to cancel conservation of energy, and you have to cancel the action and reactionary laws.
This is a pattern. Terry knows he has no clue what he's talking about. So what does he do? He drops a name. Norman J. Wildberger. Who is that? What does he say? What did he do? No attempt to elaborate. It's just a name drop to pretend he's part of a grander discourse. He isn't. Then, of course, he deflects to concepts in physics like conservation of energy, which are not relevant whatsoever to the pure math he's trying to discuss. This is all he can do to deflect from his terrible math.
Dollar times.
That's literally not what's going on at all. They're talking about what would happen if a new concept was introduced that undermined causality itself. That is exactly what they're talking about. That is like deep. And Dave doesn't get it. He doesn't get it at all. He's literally the exact, I don't want to say he is demonstrating exactly the problems that come from learning in our current education system. Learning. It's not learning. It's memorization and accreditation. And it is telling people that they're experts because they succeeded in a system that was not the system that they actually are being accredited as being an expert in. It's like taking tests about the different parts of an engine and knowing what they all are, what they're all called. When I point to that part of the engine and you say that's a piston, I point to that part of the engine and you say that's a, I don't know, like a belt, like a drive belt or whatever. I'm not a mechanic, but that doesn't actually mean that you are an expert on engines. If I give you an engine, can you take it apart and put it back together? Can you fix it when it's broken? Do you know what it needs to do? Do you know what how those parts interact and how this thing going on with this part can actually impact this thing going on with this part? And you see the system as a whole because you see it working. Mechanics are experts on engines, not people who went and got their PhD in just like memorizing engine parts and like the history of engines and all these facts, all this knowledge, this out of context things. I mean, it's not even that it's out of context. It's out of the context. It's outside the context that it is actually that it is claiming to be within. And so when Terrence says that conservation of energy has nothing to do with what the topics that they're talking about, of what Terrence is talking about, and obviously, like, it's a huge problem when you're just assuming that when you say things like Terrence knows, that he is actually just he knows nothing about what he's talking about, and he's just name dropping. You can't name drop somebody like that usually without learning about them because you were pursuing the subject in which they were relevant to. You can't. You wouldn't even know who they are. I don't know who that is, even. Well, I mean, I've heard of them, but like I don't know as much as Terrence Howard knows about them. And it's clear he does know exactly why it was important to bring that guy up, because he said this is related to what that guy was saying about like undermining and overturning the laws of conservation of energy. And they're talking about how causality necessitates that if you get rid of something on that's more fundamental than something else, everything above it is going to disappear. You can't pull the foundation out from under the house and keep the house. That's all they're saying. And Dave doesn't know. He can't see it. He can't, because he's not. I don't want to say he can't think, because that's wrong. He's not thinking in that instance. He's just a parrot. That's it. He is ChatGPT in that circumstance. He's acting as ChatGPT acts in that circumstance. That's more accurate to say. He's not. I'm not saying he's an idiot, but I'm saying this is a moment of idiocy. What it means is like this is a moment of him not being able to make any sense. He thinks they make no sense. That's not true. They're having a conversation about causality and pulling the rug out from under science and what that implies. And to you, it might sound like, if you don't know if you're not paying attention to what they're saying and you're trying to follow along, actually, you don't realize that they're actually talking to each other. They're struggling to talk to each other. And it might make them look like they don't know what they're saying. But no, it's that they're trying actively to figure out what to say. They're not being a parrot. And ChatGPT does not think. ChatGPT can pass the bar and write essays and do all these things that kids can do in school. And it does them exactly the same way that most kids do them in school. It just pulls from what other people have said and puts together and makes a little nice bow on it. And, it's coherent enough with what they've been told to, get this grade or that. And that's that. But they didn't go out and actually like experience the subject. They just went out and read what people said about it. And then, maybe they thought about it a bit, but like, it's funny because people think that ChatGPT is so impressive, and it is an amazing tool. That said, the most incredible thing about ChatGPT is what it has revealed about our education system, which is that you can go through all of it and ace everything without knowing or understanding anything. I would say without understanding anything. That's wild, guys. It's a wild revelation to have. It's not enough to just memorize things in school. And, when humiliate people when they don't use the terms that you like. This was the whole straight lines thing. By the way,
1,000 years ago was draw straight lines where the circles overlap, and I thought in what I was reasoning with regard to all energy being expressed in motion, all motion being expressed in waves, all waves being curved, and that there were no straight lines in the universe. So I was like,
there's several errors in what you just said.
Terry begins to malfunction when he isn't allowed to spew his well-rehearsed script. It's right back to his word salad about energy and motion and waves. Eric doesn't like it, though.
If I stop there, we'll get off track again.
Yeah, but you should correct those errors while we're there.
Okay, it is not true that all energy is expressed in motion.
what energy is not expressed in motion?
Potential energy is not expressed in motion. If I have a weight on a spring, which is sort of the quintessential, people don't know this, but most of physics comes out of the system represented by weight on a spring.
Mm-hmm.
Potential energy, the energy of position, not motion. I wonder, has anyone else brought that up? Whatever he could mean by that, he's wrong. For example, potential energy is the energy held by an object by virtue of its position in a field, like a gravitational or electromagnetic field. No motion, yet energy. Eric elaborates somewhat excessively, and then Terry desperately tries to come off like he has any ability to discuss basic physics.
Because all of the energy is in the potential of the spring.
It's in the stress of the crystallization that has occurred within that system.
And then you will say something like,
The moment but that energy is still being held together. There is still energy there, and it's still moving at a microscopic level. It's still spinning centrifugal.
He just says the word crystallization for no reason, and then tries to bring up other forms of kinetic energy that don't have anything to do with what Eric is talking about. If you compress a spring, it has potential energy, and it is not moving. That's the point. Eric should have just said that repeatedly if necessary. By talking at great length about esoteric concepts and terminology, it's too easy for the viewer to get lost, and for Terry to then find places to hide within the jargon to pretend he knows what he's talking about. Compressed spring, no motion, potential energy. The
Actually, what Terrence is getting at is that there is like, and we're going to talk about this because it's related to my work at some much more in depth in the future. But gravity is motion. It is like it's like meta motion. There is force or there is movement occurring on a metaphysical level that is not as physical as we define it in the mainstream. Okay, so so that is what is responsible for mass, which is responsible for potential energy in the circumstances in which we're used to, like, you're holding an object up and it's got potential energy because there's force being pulled down, or there's a spring being compressed, and well, I mean, Eric does talk about this kind of in the he's mentioned it before, that there's a difference between weight on a spring and a weight on like a scale, and that's actually true. But the thing is like that you can't, when you say, oh, you're just getting into these esoteric concepts. No. But we're not trying to go to like 6th to like 12th grade science class with this discussion with Eric and Terrence. Yeah, he might be an actor and he might not have a degree in any of the sciences school, the hard sciences. Guess what? Neither do I, and that's fine. I'm totally capable of engaging with those subjects, and I have, with some of them at least. Competency is knowing what you're competent at. That's really what it is. It's like to think that you're competent at something that you're not competent at. That is incompetency. It's kind of a funny thing when you think about it. But if you know that you're incompetent about something, you're not actually. It's not incompetence. You just know that you're not good at it. So like it's your awareness is key. But when what they're talking about, and when Terrence says things like, oh, the crystallized structure of that moment, essentially, he's talking about like the like the perception, like the state that it is observed at. Okay, when we're talking about change, so I have this model of information change, okay? And it is about like fundamental information change, and it's basically to show that information is context. And it's going to be in my paper, but it's on my website a bit too. And these are just these models are them. And I'm sure, I'm not going to say I'm sure, but it would be wrong if Dave saw this and was like, oh, it's just a bunch of numbers and a bunch of letters that he knows nothing about. No. That would be very wrong. What this is it's a model of how to change information in a system and maintain coherence throughout the change. So basically, you start with this one where there's like diagonal line of red cells containing a 0, and they're surrounded by green cells containing a 1, and it's just this 4x4 grid or matrix. The goal is to change all the reds with the circle with the 0 to greens with 1s, and all the green cells with 1 into reds with 0. So that this is the goal. Okay, this is the end state. This is what we want. It's the reverse of this. How do we do that and maintain coherence? Fundamentally, you have to change it one thing if you're within the system, you have to change it one thing at a time. And because each time it maintains the coherence of that, in that it is like because you haven't changed anything else. So that's what allows it to maintain coherence, because what is defining of one of these cells is what it's surrounded by to some degree. So kind of from within the system, you have to think about it like that. So as you do this, this is a state and then an action, and a state and then an action. This state is the crystallization state that basically Terrence is talking about when you're looking at something that is being perceived in physical space. It's basically just it is the observation, that it is the state that is being of perception that is being perceived. And Terrence is saying that there's some thing moving and you're not seeing it because you're just looking at the state. So basically he's saying that there is a process going on of change and movement, which if we look at it from a God's eye view of this, we can see that's what's happening. It goes from this to this to this to this to this. But if we just zoom in and all we're just looking at is that, Terrence is saying you're just looking at this, and you're saying that there's no energy, that there's energy but no motion. But if you back up and look, you can see that we're moving from this to this. That's what he's saying. It's what it seems like he's saying, at least. And I can deduce that by looking at how he's using the words, not by looking at what words he's using. And not just saying he's using the word crystallization to, for nefarious purposes and to confuse people because he's a moron. No. Think about what the term crystallization means. It means when something crystallizes, it's being fixed. It's turning solid. That's what it means. And we know that because you can infer that because what it means for things to crystallize, and you have the context of that in your experience. But you have to put in a little bit of effort. Come on, man. This is lazy. It's so lazy. I don't even want to say it's lazy, but because maybe it's not lazy, but maybe it's just he doesn't even know how to proceed. It's like saying somebody's lazy for not making a decision on something, but of whether or not the world, whether or not free will exists or whether or not the universe is deterministic. It's like, well, you asked a bad question. There is no answer to that. They're not mutually exclusive. They're dependent concepts, and you're trapped. I think I'm going to have to assume that is what's happening with Dave. I can't assume that he's just lazy. That's wrong of me. It's lazy of me to assume that he's being lazy. I should assume that he's trapped, because that is actually something that we can talk about that's valuable, but it's not valuable to assume somebody's lazy, actually. So I take it back. He might be, but I don't know. So I shouldn't even be thinking about it. But it does, I will say that it's important to put in work if you're going to address these things. You have to try and understand what somebody is actually saying. When I first started this project, again, another model that is relevant to this, the first model that I ever made is just a model of decision tree of thinking. It's this. And this decision tree of thinking, I hope I was even showing the yeah, I was. Okay, the model before. But this decision tree of thinking is about how to think. How do you think? Objective, like what is the process? What is the beginning of thinking? And what I realized is that you have to take your currently assumed default status, assume the opposite of the default status is true, and then look for evidence that would suggest that it's true. This is not what is done by most people who are just repeating things in who are just they're just going by they're just operating on their training from school versus like actually thinking. Training is not thinking. Training is sit is sitting when you're told to sit. Thinking is like sitting because it's, I don't know, like you're it makes sense to sit in the circumstance in which you're choosing to sit. Maybe you're just your legs are hurting and they're tired. Okay, so that's more. You're thinking more when you do that than when you just like sit because somebody says sit. I'm thinking about a dog and training. This is not what clearly not what Dave is doing. He is not assuming this is his current default status is that Terrence is wrong, obviously. He is not assuming that Terrence is right and then looking for evidence that Terrence is right. If he doesn't do that, he's not thinking. It is the only way to think. It is the internalization of the scientific method. The scientific method is the externalization of what I just showed you. There's no other way to think. It is the only way to do it. Every other way will always lead to confirmation bias. And that's why when you do experiments, you follow the scientific method if you're going to be rigorous. But you also have to do that internally if you're going to be rigorous. It's not enough to just only do it when you have, a physical experiment that you're doing. It has to be something that you also do inside your own mind. And guess what? So, an experiment that you're physically doing is part of your mind. But when you're operating on your internal thoughts, you still have to do the same process if you want to avoid confirmation bias. That's the whole point of the scientific method, is to avoid, bias, basically. And there's a reason why there's only one scientific method, is because it is the way in which you must do things. Doesn't mean it's the only way to find out the truth. It's that it's the only way to find out the truth by thinking about it. You can stumble onto it, but you can't. But if you're going to think about it or use logic, then to find out the truth, you have to follow the rules. This is the rules. Guess what? Dave is not doing. He's not following the rules. For all of his learning and all of his memorization and all the facts and knowledge that he has, he does not recognize that he is not thinking. And he does this, by the way, almost every time that I've seen him. Not every time. I've seen him do it a couple times where I was like, that's good job. And I've commented on it in a couple videos before. But usually, from what I see, he just assumes that people are, he usually, from what I see, assumes people are frauds, or states that people are frauds. I don't know what he assumes really, but he states that he believes that they're frauds, and he calls them frauds, or he calls them morons. He does not assume that what they're saying is about something, that they're trying to communicate something that is true, because that's what you need to do in order to put in the effort to actually figure out what they're trying to say. Sometimes you have to think about what it means for something to crystallize, and then put it into the context of the conversation that is being had in order to actually understand what is being said. You can't just, you can't not do that, right, is the right way of saying that. You can't not do that. If you don't do that, then you have failed to think about it at all, to have any thoughts on it. You can't, it doesn't work to just say, oh, this is basic math that everybody learned in grade school. That doesn't mean anything. So what? People learn all kinds of things in grade school that are wrong. We know that. Everybody knows that. We can debate on what things are those things are, but like everybody knows that some things that you learn in grade school are wrong. What, nobody ever told you anything in grade school that you later found out was? I remember somebody told me blood is actually blue and it's only red when it's exposed to the air. And I was like, oh man, that's like that rocks. I didn't know that at all. That rocks my whole world. And then I went and I told everybody. I remember I was in elementary school. By the way, that's not true. But they said something. They were like, that's why your veins are blue. Because it's really blue and then it turns to red when it gets exposed to the air. And I took their word for it. I don't know why. But guess what? Why your veins are blue? Because a lot of times veins are blue. That's why your veins are blue. It's blood is red. Yeah, even when it's inside your body. So, next clip. Please hit the like button if you're finding this valuable. I know it's late, but all 7 live people right now, you guys are the real ones, and I am very happy to be back. I didn't know what I was going to talk about exactly tonight, but this was fun. Let me get to the chat though real quick. But, I've watched, I think, 260 or so of Professor Wildberg's lectures videos. He does disagree with a fair big of modern pure mathematics. Okay. I interpreted that as just the geometric state of the atoms and the materials of the spring at that moment. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. It's you're looking at something and you're taking a snapshot of it. It's the crystallization of a moment, is what Terrence is saying. But really, when you look at things more broadly and more fundamentally, there is change occurring, which is, he's saying movement, but like maybe movement isn't the right word. Maybe we should say change. There is, but we, how do you say that there's like things are actually being acted on and there's action happening without actually saying move? You could say there is action happening, but it's not, and you could say, okay, well, I accept there's nothing moving, because I will go with the definition that we currently have, which we should do because we're trying to maintain coherence. So what's a better term to describe what I'm trying to say? This is what is a better way of saying what I think Terrence is trying to say, which is not, which is there's action occurring and it is responsible for even potential energy. And so you can't say that there's energy when there's no action, fundamental action. And he's right. But the thing is that you have to place that into the correct context of which is there are certain things about the nature of the universe that you have to be right about or assume in order to and have them be correct. I guess I think for that to work, for that statement to actually work and be true. But I think that it is true if the nature of existence is sentience fundamentally, which then yeah, action is occurring all the time, even if this one, if I compress a spring, like that doesn't mean that there isn't action happening on a metaphysical level that is impacting the properties of matter on a physical level. And that is what I think Terrence is trying to say. I have to assume that what he's trying to say is something that is true. And by the way, guess what? Whenever I've done that with Terrence Howard on this stream, it seems like he's actually like really, really like has a deep. He does understand what a lot of what he's trying to say. That doesn't mean that he is doing the best job at describing it, and it's not because he is a moron or an idiot. It's because it's hard to pick the right words because you kind of have to you have to grant the establishment its terms, and then you have to operate within those terms if you want to engage. or you have to grant the mainstream its terms, and you should, because that's how we maintain coherence of discussion in the first place. But you have to be aware of what you're granting as the definition, and then be aware of what the definition of is that you're using for the term that is the new term that you're introducing. So instead of saying motion, you should say action. There's some action occurring, but then people might turn around and be like, action in the dictionary means this, and it really means motion. It means something is being physically acted on, and and it's just like, I don't know what, at some point you have to be engaging with somebody who's trying to actually engage with you, not just trying to humiliate you and bury the like the engagement under just a pile of insults. I really don't believe, and I have to assume that that Dave is really stuck in order to actually engage with the subject. I was afraid to do this stream. But I did want to talk about this stuff, but I didn't want to be chasing a chicken with its head cut off, and I didn't know how to do that because if all I did was say that it's wrong to like insult people all the time, and just show him insulting people the entire stream, that would not be constructive. Doesn't mean that sometimes it's not appropriate, but it just means that to show it, but it just means like it should be in context, and that. But like, if I assume that Dave is just a dick and that's why he's being like this, that is me chasing a chicken with its head cut off. If I assume that he's genuinely stuck, and then I don't care if he's being a dick or not. I mean, I will tell you, he's absolutely being a dick. He's being a dick. Yeah, he's not he isn't a dick. Sometimes he's not a dick, but like oftentimes on social media he's a dick. But that's not the point. The point is, I in order to engage, I mean, maybe I have to, I don't know, I have to just take it seriously what he's saying, and I'm trying to do that. And I genuinely believe he is genuinely stuck. He's not engaging with what they're engaging with. That's how you know. And he doesn't recognize that they're even engaging with each other. But they do, and I do. So who's the expert? Here, next clip.
Everything that you touch in the space made of sphere.
And platonic solids and whatever. You could spend your entire life, and I've seen people do it, staring into this and just finding cool thing after cool thing, thinking that you're seeing Jesus. I promise you.
He's being rightfully dismissive, but he's not actually holding Terry accountable for anything he's saying. There are moments where he talks down to him, but they're too few and far between, and they don't stick for the viewer.
But if light passing through these show the same cymatics that we look at when we're looking at natural.
Is it clear that they don't have the same goal? Terrence and Eric and my goal in this is to actually engage with what is being stated. And by the way, just to engage with it, yeah, I totally understand that you can just get lost in math and lost in geometries and lost in numbers and lost in pattern and just think that you're just being like enamored with it and feel like you're seeing God and or God's creation. And guess what? Maybe you are, like maybe you are. Maybe that's why it feels that way, Is that wrong? But here's the thing. It is important to just keep goals in mind. If you just chase patterns in math, sometimes I've done it, and sometimes you can find things, and I found tons of patterns when I've chased patterns. But that is not the instances in which I actually figure things out. Usually, it's I do discover patterns, but that's not, and it's beautiful and it's amazing, and I know that there's something responsible for that pattern and that's deep and meaningful, but I don't know what it is just by chasing patterns. You have to have a goal that is set. And that's how you actually like understand what you experience when you're on some journey of learning, because the goal is what dictates and sets the context of whatever it is that you end up figuring out. If you don't have a goal, then it's actually like pretty hard to make progress if you don't have a goal. That's pretty obvious, right? How do you make progress if you don't have a goal? Progress is defined by having a goal. How do you define progress without a goal? You can't. So if you have no goal, then you're stuck. What is the goal for Dave? Well, the goal is to dismiss, according to his own words, dismiss Terrence, talk down to him enough so that the audience realizes that if you act like Terrence, or if you try and think about the things that Terrence is thinking about, and you don't have academic accreditations or whatever, you should be humiliated, publicly humiliated. That is his goal. He stated it. I'm not like I'm taking him at his word. I'm not trying to like infer his goal. I mean, I don't know what, I think that there's more to what everybody has multiple reasons for interacting with anything. But so I actually think there's more to Dave than meets the eye. And that's not just me, being grace giving. I genuinely believe that. But it's also just, as he states here, his public goal and what he thinks should be the public goal for Eric in this discussion is to show the audience that Terrence is an idiot, and basically like teach them a lesson. Use him to teach them a lesson. That's not science. That's not the scientific. That's not the pursuit of science. That's not the love of truth. That's not. Maybe it comes from the love of truth, because hate comes from love. You hate something that you view as a threat to that which you love. You don't hate something that you don't view as a threat. But if you think that somebody needs to be humiliated in front of everybody to teach the world a lesson and all the viewers a lesson, don't you dare question these things unless you go and you learn it from what the truth is from those people over there. Don't you dare try and do it on your own. Which is ironic, because I'm pretty sure that Professor Dave is learning all the things that he learns, or he is learning is not the right word. It's memorizing is the right word, but he tries to learn all the things that he tries to learn outside of academia. He might seek academics, but so is Terrence Howard. And, he also seeks other people, but I look at anybody's ideas. But yeah, this is not science. This is the antithesis of the pursuit of truth. It is it's just the pursuit of humiliating somebody, and that is a totally different goal. That nobody with that goal should be engaging with these people. Should be engaging with Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard should never speak to Dave until Dave figures out that he has to what it means to think and how he has to approach an engagement with Terrence. He should never speak to him. A debate between them would be just useless. Nobody's opinions. Actually, Terrence Howard is more likely to gain fans from that debate, because of just some people are going to intuitively pick up that Terrence is describing something that intuitively seems like he's onto something. That's not going to be everybody else who's who's coming at this from an academic perspective, and not even just an academic perspective, but a dogmatic academic perspective, I guess. Or I don't even know what the right word to describe it is. Whatever it is that you just think school is the answer to everything, and degrees are the answer to everything, and then like those people their goal is not the same. It's not to figure out the truth. It's like to watch somebody be humiliated, or it is to um you know to affirm their trust in the education system, and or the system that gave them their accreditations, or that they've dedicated so much time to. I mean, I get it. It's painful, like 8 hours a day, all day long, in sitting at a desk, and all the stress that comes with tests and homework and everything like that for literally 12 years, and then 13 years, I guess, probably 12, you could say, and then college, and then any other additional you know levels of education, master's, PhD, whatever it is that you choose to go to. It's a big investment, time, money, energy. And what if you have to actually like consider the fact that it's trained it trains people to not think, and you have to actually now question everything that you think you know. It's really tough, and it takes an incredible amount of humility and bravery and energy and effort to do that. So I don't blame people who don't want to, but we gotta admit the truth. So this is another top set here. So
Get back to the bad math.
Yep, hit 2, square root. It'll be over one more. I think that may be it. Yeah. Yep. Cube it. Hit x to the third. No. Go back. Yep. Hit 2. Square root. Cube it. Right up there. Yep. Now divide by 2. Hit equal. Cube it again. X to the third. Divide by 2. That is a loop. Cube it again. Hit x to the third. That's an unnatural
Talk to me about
equation.
unnatural.
It's a loop. It's a tuck inside of the matrix. It does not allow
No.
for math to make
No.
sense because of the identity principle.
There is no loop. There is no tuck in the matrix. Terry is just a moron who doesn't understand basic math. Why is it so hard to accept that there could be a number for which cubing it and doubling it yields the same result? What would someone do if they wanted to figure out whether such a number exists? Well, we could do some basic algebra. Let's find the value x for which cubing it, x cubed, gives you the same result as doubling it, 2x. Well, let's set these expressions equal to each other and solve for x. X cubed is x times x times x. Now what do we do? Let's cancel an x from both sides. That leaves us with x times x, or x squared, equals 2. Take the square root of both sides, and we get root 2. X equals root 2. Root 2 is a number for which cubing and doubling gives the same result, 2 root 2. You can even prove this by looking at the graphs of these functions. Y equals x cubed gives this curve here, and y equals 2x is this line here. Where do these functions intersect? Root 2, negative root 2, and 0, since they both pass through the origin. There are 3 values for which cubing and doubling gives the same result. There is no loop. He's just performing basic arithmetic operations over and over again for absolutely no reason. You can double 2 to get 4, and then subtract 2 to get 2, and do that over and over again until the end of the universe. That's just you wasting your time. Now, I'm quite confident that every single person watching this video understood what I just explained, and also learned this in middle school or by about 10th grade at the latest. This is what somebody should be showing Terry. How does Eric choose to address this baloney?
You're trying to say something. What you're saying is wrong.
But what I'm seeing,
No. What you're saying is fine. I agree that you have a transformation that I called T. You can put those 2 steps together, which is cube and divide by 2. That thing's going to be dead still till the end of time. That's your point. And then you pass judgment on it. And you say that is not logical and it's irrational. And I don't know what you mean.
He doesn't mean anything. He just can't do basic math. So please teach him the basic math. That's the reason you're there, isn't it?
that loop right there.
Is your point that there's something special about the square root of 2?
I'm saying that the square root of 2 is a manufactured number because of the identity principle. If the identity principle was not involved, then they wouldn't have a problem with 1 times 1 equaling 2. Or
Why are you offended by 1 times 1 equaling 1?
just because
we're going to come back to this, but okay, there's so much to deconstruct. Here's what I'm going to explain why. When Dave says this is what Eric should be doing, he should be showing. He first of all, like to say, everybody learned this by middle school, guys. Everybody did in middle school math is not learn anything. They memorized out of equations outside of context, in which they are linked to the real world. Yeah, they are in context within the lesson, but like they're detached from the real world a lot of times. I was very good at like word problems in math because it's much more tangible, but and I could figure things out without an equation. I didn't want to use equations in in math in school, I would literally sit there and be like, "Don't tell me the formula. I don't want to know the formula. Like, I want to challenge myself. I want to see if I can figure that out in the word problem by thinking about the logic of it." And I would literally sit there, and I would get points off because I wouldn't show my work, but I would sit there and just think about it in my head and the relationships between everything, and then eventually I would just write down the answer, and I was really good at it. And I do that with all kinds of things that I build and stuff too. I'll start building something, and then I know that I hit some problem that I have to figure out, and I'll just put it on in the corner of my office, and I'll just stare at it from my desk, like when I'm working. And every now and then I just look at it and I just think about, like, how would I solve this? How would I solve that? And I'll do that for months at a time with certain things that I'm building that are important, and I can't like build it and fix it and build it and fix it. Like, I've got to actually like get. It'd be hard to change after the fact, or it'd be expensive or something. Put a lot of thought into it, and then I just, as soon as I really have it dialed down, I just execute it. And but that's not what Dave just showed. Dave just showed the rest of the problems on the math test that are just memorization of the formula, and it doesn't tell us anything. When he just told us two different language. It's basically what he said was, he said, Terrence doesn't understand water, so you need Eric needs to just show him that it's agua. And then he showed it a different way, and he said Eric just needs to show Terrence that it is mine, which is water, I think, in Hebrew. It's like, you didn't tell me anything about water. You didn't explain it. You didn't tell me anything about it. I learned nothing. You didn't teach me anything. Other than that, there's multiple different ways in which to say the same thing, which is, there's a way of doing it with the equations, algebraic equations. Yes, there's also a geometric way of plotting it on a graph. And there's also a way of saying it in a sentence. Guess what? That doesn't actually explain anything. So when Dave says that's Eric's job, is to go there and just show him that when you do this formula, it spits this out. Terrence knows that. That's exactly what he did on the calculator. You don't need to tell him. You just didn't use a calculator. And then we're like, oh, look, if we do the exact same equation basically on not on a calculator, we can show that it gets the same result that he's showing on a calculator. No shit, obviously. Oh, look, if we show it on a graph, it shows the exact same results on a graph as it does on a calculator, which shows the exact same results as it does in an algebraic equation. No shit. Like, obviously, none of that matters. You don't teach somebody anything by doing that. What is it? Showing them that you can use a calculator, or you can use an algebraic equation, or you can use a graph. No shit. That's not the point. You didn't get what is going on. Eric is starting to get what's going on. And he's saying, I get what you're trying to say. You're not doing a good job saying it. And then he's asking Terrence, he's saying you're ascribing meaning to this. And guess what? He is, I would assume. I think he is. I mean, just seeing everything else that Terrence focuses on regarding this stuff, like he's basically saying, and when he's saying there's glitch in the matrix, like it doesn't make sense. He's saying that there's something fundamentally meaningful about this mathematical loop that he, as he calls it, which is just that there is a number in which cubing and or what was it getting the square root, or cubing and squaring it is the same, something like that. I want to get into Excel and actually like look at this equation that he's talking about, because I haven't done that yet, but I don't really need to kind of get what the gist of what is being said. I do think I could learn something by looking at it more in depth, but I already know what he's trying to say, which is that there's something fundamentally meaningful like about it. And Dave is saying there's nothing meaningful about it. He's saying that obviously you can take 1, add 2, and then you get 3, and then you subtract 2 and you get 3, and you add 2, you get 3, and subtract 2 and get 3. That's not the same thing that Terrence is saying. And it seems like it is if you're just looking on the surface level, but there's unique things about the numbers involved that he's talking about, and the operations involved even that he's mentioning, that it's not just just because it works, you can add 2 and subtract 2. That's not the same thing as cubing something and squaring something, and getting the same answer again, or getting the answer in this. Like, it's not the same, because when you're saying I'm cubing something versus I'm squaring something, or I'm getting the square root versus the cube root, or whatever it was, like, you're changing the quantities in which things are being divided or multiplied, and you're not doing that when you're adding 2 and then subtracting 2 and adding 2 and subtracting 2. You're keeping everything consistent. That is, because you can do that for everything. You can do that for every quantity of number. Add 3, subtract 3. Add 10, subtract 10. But what if you added 10 and subtracted 4 and still got the same number? Like, that would be unique, right? And that's kind of what more in line with what Terrence is trying to get at with this whole cubing and squaring thing, is that you're changing the quantities and you're getting the same result. That's in which, like, things are being operated on and getting the same result. And he's saying that's odd. Guess what? I'm starting to think more about that equation, and I think maybe we should look at it. But I'm sure it's so late. But it's that's. I bet you it would line up with some of the models in my work. I guarantee it. Actually, I mean, I can't really guarantee it, but I would bet. Maybe we'll look at it at the end. Times this. This is literally exactly 42 minutes into Dave's video is the spot that we will maybe come back to. Maybe it's the answer, guys, is 42 minutes. 42 minutes, 0 seconds is what we're paused at right now. That's funny. But like, they're like, my point, they don't have the same goal. You can't argue with somebody who doesn't have the same goal as you. You're not arguing. You're not. This is not a debate between Terrence and Dave. Debate is when people have, I don't even want to use the term debate, but like a true engagement is when people have the same goal. That's not what's happening. But Dave does not realize that if Eric did what Dave did, it would be less meaningful than what Eric did. Eric rightly recognized that Terrence is ascribing meaning to what is what this this weird intersection of operations, and there almost certainly is meaning associated with it, like deep metaphysical meaning, almost certainly. And Dave can say, no, there isn't, but that's not an argument. If I were to say that there was, I would back it up. And right now, I'm not going to look at it right now, but maybe I will at the end of the stream if you guys want me to. Or if you want me to, just comment it in the chat and I'll just do it. But I bet you we could find a little bit of things that probably is related to. Hold on 1 second. My computer is not plugged in. Now it is. But to say, no, there is not any meaning to it. You can't actually engage with anything by assuming there's no meaning to it. You have to assume there's meaning to it, and then you have to try and figure out what that meaning would be if there was meaning. If you assume there's no meaning, then you won't ever find the meaning if there is meaning. You've trapped yourself again. This is what I mean by, like, he really is trapped. I mean, we don't even have to be in his own head to realize it, because his statements reveal it. But you have to understand, like, what is trapping in order to even see the trap. That's the thing. The best traps, the hardest traps to escape, are invisible or difficult to see. I wouldn't even say invisible, but they're the traps that are not seen. Those are the best traps, or the most difficult traps to avoid, or the most difficult traps to escape, are the ones that you don't even know you're in. And that's Dave's problem with this stuff right now. Obviously, we talked about 1 times 1 equaling 2, and maybe we should say one grow one is equal to two, because and I've seen this in my own work, and you can see this in the Fibonacci sequence too. You can't like when you try and look at like the real growth of information, you recognize that um, that the way in which we use the term multiplication or times in practical mathematics is what we should call it, is does not exist or does not work with fundamental logic. And but the right way to approach that is to change the terms, not to say 1 times 1 is equal to 2. It's to say 1 grow 1 is equal to 2 or something. You have to change the term and then explain what is it that you're trying to show. But I talked about it in my stream of, not my last stream, but the stream before that, I think the last one I did about this, about Terrence Howard. So, next slide.
I could be wrong.
You could be wrong. You are wrong, Terry. You're so wrong that the word wrong does not sufficiently describe your wrongness. You are, as they say, fractally wrong. You are wrong at every conceivable level of resolution. You use words incorrectly. You combine those words with other concepts incorrectly, and the combinations themselves result in incorrect statements. Everything you say is immaculately wrong, and yet you confidently present your gibberish as though it is the solution to every problem in physics because you're a narcissist.
Deep inside the orange or any other piece of matter is nothing but a dancing, vibrating cosmic symphony of strings.
Okay, now if you take what he just said, this is entirely respectable. This is a Columbia professor lecturing me for 40 fucking years about what they're going to do one day when they grow up. That everything is just a string, and just the way a violin can vibrate in different modes. All of the particles come from this excitation string. It's exactly how you sound with the linchpin. Now, string theory is not a terrible idea.
That's so funny. That's exactly what it's funny because the people in academia who look down on people outside of academia who would try and engage with academic subjects on and think that they can actually make progress on them. They're saying the same thing. Oh, it's all just a string, and maybe this when it's this element or it's this state of matter, it's vibrating at this frequency. But then if it vibrates at a higher frequency, it's in a different plane, and then we can't even perceive it because it's no longer vibrating on the like frequency that we're vibrating at. Oh well, so like I'm pretty sure that people who are called New Age would say that like that's that they're like that everything is just vibration and that depending on the level of the frequency that you vibrate at is dictates what you're able to perceive. And guys, it's the same. I'm not saying it's all nonsense either. I actually think that the New Age people get the context right, but the problem is a lack of rigor. But there's lots of institutional reasons that are preventing that to some degree. But a lot of times it's the lack of rigor. But even when they are rigorous, it's not accepted by the establishment because it's operating on fundamental assumptions that are kind of rejected by the establishment, and then stated that you can't actually take a position on it, and that's not part of science. And at some point, we got to reconcile the fact that like you cannot divorce mind from matter because we only know of matter from our minds. We interpret matter from our minds. We perceive matter through our minds. We are minds. You can't divorce the concept of mind and everything that is involved with it from anything. So definitely not science, and it is holding us back. But and it didn't used to. It's funny because somebody said I forgot if it was in this one, but I think it was in here. maybe basically Eric is I think says that science is broken and that we have certain like agreed upon rules that that people followed, and that was like part of the success of it, and that one of them was that you like leave your religion out of it. And um, the problem is not. I disagree with that. I mean, look at science and discovery and technological advancement and everything throughout the ages. It was up until like it's only within the last like 50 years that we have actually stopped talking about God in the sciences. And the problem is the term religion, and and part of the reason why it's such a problem now is because it is because of how we're taught about religion is in school by people who they don't believe a lot of times what they're teaching you, or they don't live it. So they're not telling you this from the perspective of somebody who understands it enough to adopt it. And I remember when I had a whole semester of like humanities or whatever in middle school where we had to learn about the religions. We all took like little religion tests. It's like, do you believe this? Do you believe this? Do you believe this? And it would tell you, your results. And I remember I took it and it told me that the best match for me was Buddhism. Okay, that's basically what everybody gets if they're like secular. And um but the thing is that you think that my secular humanities teacher in 7th grade was an expert on Islam? Like he really understood Islam? Or do you think he like read the pamphlet before the semester and was like, that says this is what you need to teach about Islam? And we, by the way, we have to teach all of them as because some people basically there's so much involved with this, but the history matters because it really screwed us up. And it was the schools. It was that we used to, God was an assumption. Even Einstein said, like the greatest question that I would have is like, did God have any choice in the rules of the universe when he created it? And people always who are academic physicists are always like, oh, he didn't really mean God. He meant like the God of Spinoza. Okay. Which basically they're saying he doesn't really mean God. He doesn't mean a sentient being like that is, has its own thoughts and feelings. Really, it means like the laws, the nature, the logic. There's no sovereignty or sentience behind it, and but you don't know that. Why would he say it? I mean, the thing is like even just thinking about it, you can't even. In asking that question by saying, did God have any choice? And then you're saying that he needs the God of logic, the God of causality, as if this is like that means anything other than you're just dismissing the idea that God was making that this is a God that has their own thoughts and feelings and choices and will. And by the way, like, who are you to tell to say what Einstein was thinking when we can read his own words? You don't say, did God have any choice in creating the laws of the universe if you're not thinking about it from the perspective of God being a sentient being with his own will that can make choices. And clearly Einstein thought about the world like that. And that doesn't mean he like, approved of every like rule in the Torah or something like that. It believed it. It just means like he was thinking about this stuff from the perspective of it being within the context of a sentient being, a sentient creator. He was. You can't ask that question without thinking about it in that context. And to dismiss it is idiocy. It is idiocy. It is a moment of severe idiocy to do that. And it's not, you're not engaging with them at all. Like you have to take people from what they're saying. You can't be like, oh, he doesn't really mean. No. If I look at the context of the question, you're just saying, oh no, but he means something different by God. No. We can remove the term God. Did did whoever create the universe have any choice? I don't have to say God. But now do we remove the other part of the sentence? Do we remove this choice part of the sentence? Like, guess what? You have no more sentence. So you have to dismiss his entire statement as and you can't change if you're trying to change the definition of even just that term God in that. And I've seen Michio Kaku do that countless times, and it is it's gaslighting to this most. It's just so it's gaslighting, and I don't know if it's conscious or anything like that, but it's like you are saying no, that's not what he's really saying. What he's saying is this, and it's like, why don't you let Einstein speak for himself, Michio? But even Eric's paper on geometric unity states at the very top, it quotes Einstein. It says, my greatest question is whether or not God had any choice in the creation, in the laws of the universe, basically when he created it, more or less. Eric thinks about that. He can call himself an atheist all he wants on podcasts, but it's why you put that at the top of your theory of everything then. But speaking of, my point about God was you in the schools is you had people who didn't want their kids being taught about a religion that their family didn't practice, and so they said you have to you should be secular, and so but we have to teach about biology. So then and then someone with a different religion was like, why are you teaching about biology or Christianity? Because now biology has been separated from theism in this circumstance because somebody didn't agree with Christianity. And then some, Hindu person's like, well, now if you're going to teach about Christianity, then you have to teach about my religion too. And then all of a sudden, the school board, trying not to piss everybody off, is like, we have to teach about Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and maybe throw in a few others in there. Or you could be Christian or Buddhist, Jewish or Muslim, or you could believe in Darwinism or something. And it's like they have set up the system in which it's training you to accept that these are mutually exclusive. And I think that's wrong. I think it's screwed up everybody. So you can't leave God. It's funny because Eric says this in this interview. He's like, we agreed that we're going to leave religion out of it. And why does it say at the top? Why did Einstein say, my greatest question is, did God have any choice in the laws of the universe? By the way, according to my work, it does seem like he had to choose to create additional sentient beings, aka the universe. But it does appear like he had no choice in the laws of it. Very interesting. It's like that's the answer. It means that it supports the idea that determinism and choice are dependent concepts. You have to choose to create, but when you do create, you have to follow the constraints that you have to follow constraints. Of course you do. I don't even think God can escapes that. His constraints might be different. His constraints would be his oneness. And our constraint is that we're separate from other sentient beings, and he's not. And there's no one outside of God, but there's people outside of us. God can't have another person next to him, another God next to him. It's not God at that point. The definition of God is that the highest being, the initial one, sentient oneness. And there's logical reasons why there could not be an initial sentient multiplicity, because there's only one existence. But Eric, for him to be like, oh, well, we all agreed that, and when science was working, it's because we all agreed to leave religion at the door. And he was saying that there's other things too, not just that, but dude, it's at the top of your paper. But I think religion is the wrong word there. Maybe your specific religion and assuming that your way is the only way. Yeah, we should not do that. We should pursue truth. But I don't think you can get I think that when you get to truth, you're going to get to that sentience is the fundamental nature of existence, which is God, means God is, or you might have to assume that God is in order to actually like logically figure out why there is evidence for that. But if you assume there's no evidence, then like you're never going to find it. And I would agree, though, to give Dave a point. I actually think that a lot of the people that he engages with on the subject, like Stephen Meyer and them, I don't think that they do present good evidence for God. Even though I think that there is evidence, I don't think that it's the evidence that a lot of people in this discussion present. Like the Cambrian explosion that's not a good bit of evidence for God. I'm not saying it isn't evidence, but there's far more simple and far more obvious evidence. But it's like it's so close to you that it's hard to see it. That's why it's not so obvious. But it's once you do see it, you can't miss it. It's like fish, who doesn't realize they're in the water. It's like once you realize you're in the water, you can't escape it. But yeah. Watch my video linked below, Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide, and I talk about it. But string theorists, this whole string theorists, when they grow up thing, it's like they do sound exactly the same. And by the way, like string theorists, I think, are at the disadvantage. They speak math. That's a something that I don't even know if it's an advantage. I mean, sometimes it could be, but the thing is, it's a tool that they have. But over like the new age, a lot of like outside of academia, new age type of thinkers, quote unquote, like Terrence Howard, but or even like me. But I don't think that being literate in mathematics would actually necessarily be the give you as much of an upper hand as you'd think. It would be a tool, but that you could use, but it's not what's necessary to get to the most important answers. And it's just a tool. But what matters more than knowing, how to speak math, basically, or read math, is having the context correct for your concepts. And the string theorists do not have the correct context for their concepts. They don't have context for their concepts. That is why their context is wrong, because they don't have context. Guess what? Context is information. You're missing context, you don't have anything. You can have all the Calabi-Yau manifold equations that you want, but like, what's a Calabi-Yau manifold? Where is it? Why is it? Until you know that, you have to have context, an assumed context, in order to look to see if that would make sense, that like, that structure. But this was, I wonder if Dave has read Eric's theory, because Dave calls basically Brett and Eric at the beginning of the stream, like Brett Weinstein, Eric's brother, who's an evolutionary biologist. And a good one. Like, and I grew up, like, I know some of the most famous biologists in the world, some of them. And I was a little shit of a kid sometimes, and I was like sometimes, I don't want to say I was arrogant, because I was humble and also like arrogant at the same time to insert on the certain subjects. But when I would get into arguments at like 12 years old with people who have PhDs in herpetology, and they know exactly who I am to this day, and they hate me, and I feel a little bad about it, because I was just a confrontational little teenager. But I also think I wasn't necessarily wrong about what we were arguing about. But I also learned, it's because I had learned from real world experience from some of the best zoologists in the world that took me out, and ecologists in the world, and who I went out into the field with and studied. And don't tell me about these animals if you sit in a lab all day long, for the most part, and that's where you're like getting your information about them. But I mean, experience, first person experience trumps secondhand information. It was the same debate that I have now with a lot of people in academia, which is ironic and funny. But like I don't think it was arrogant of me to even get involved in those discussions. There's nothing that's, if I'm able to do it now and it's not arrogant, then is it arrogant to do it then for me because I was 15? No, it was, I had real world experience. That's why I was like arguing with them. So I take it back. It wasn't arrogance, but it was annoying. So, and I admit that. But Brett is a good, is a talented thinker, and a talented scientist because he's a good thinker. He's good at thinking. I don't even want to say talented thinker. He is good at thinking, and that really comes from practice. It doesn't. I'm sure that there is like intrinsic talent to it, but it's not IQ. It's like it's more than that. I think the ability to be a good thinker really comes from wisdom and experience, and humility. I think all of those things matter way more than IQ when it comes to, are you a good thinker? IQ matters too, are you a fast thinker, but not, are you a good thinker? You can very quickly arrive at the wrong conclusion, or you can very slowly arrive at the right one. Which one is a better thinker? Clearly the person who slowly arrived at the right answer. So this is probably the last clip. This is Dave's opinion of Eric's work.
Have a conversation is dwindling to fewer than 10.
This is the summation of Eric's entire identity. He is positioning himself to appear above Terry, which he is, while simultaneously manufacturing some kernel of truth in Terry's ramblings that isn't there, in order to pretend he is unjustly mocked by academia. This serves only to bolster his own narrative of being overlooked by academia, because his theory of everything is a pile of crap, just like Terry's insane ramblings. He simply is able to package it in a more appealing way because he understands math, and Terry doesn't. And all of this is happening on Joe's show because his show has become self-aggrandizing intellectual pornography for people who like to pretend they understand complex topics, but don't. In the end, despite Eric's motives, perhaps the world is slightly better for him having outright stated numerous times that Terry has no idea what he's talking about. And yet somehow, from what I've been able to gather, Terry fans seem to feel vindicated by this episode. The fact that anyone, Terry or his fans, can walk away from this conversation without having learned anything is a gigantic missed opportunity. One thing we know for sure is that he certainly won't be shutting up anytime soon. So there you have it, my assessment of the mixed bag that was Eric and Terry on Joe Rogan. No matter what the configuration of guests, this show never really seems to reach any logical resolution, but maybe we will get there one day. Until next time.
Oh man, so lost. So lost. That's not a judgmental statement. It is an observation of something that is true about what we're talking about, at least. I'm not saying he's lost on everything. Nobody's lost on everything. But about what we're talking about here, lost. And it's so ironic, and it is like a little bit sad. I'm not saying that to like concern troll, but like to be, when you, it just, when like I said, when you chase a chicken with its head cut off, you are a chicken with its head cut off. So if you basically say that Terrence Howard is a moron, okay, he's a chicken with his head cut off. He just is running around. He has no idea where he's going. That's what basically is what Dave is saying. And then he's just reacting to it, and just, and it's not just, and it's not like what we're trying to do here. I was really trying to not do that here, where I just talk about why Dave's a moron. And Dave is not a moron. Like there were examples that we were trying to use of him, yes, but they don't represent the totality of his being, of traps and mistakes in that are not, that he doesn't realize are not thinking, but they're not thinking. Like he's not thinking and he does not realize it. That is not a judgment. It is, I'm trying to show you what it means to think. You have to take your assumed default assumption, and you have to assume the opposite of it is true, and look for honestly look for evidence of it being true, and not evidence that then you think other people would think is evidence of the opposite of your default assumption, like on like a first principles basis. Like, what would it mean? You can't be like, I'm going to go look for evidence that, if I'm trying to look if God is true, then I'm going to go look for evidence that, I don't know, Jesus, um, is, it rose from the dead, and it's like you're looking for evidence right now, and yeah, there's just writings about it, and I'm not saying that he didn't. I'm just saying that you can't be there, but that's not really what you should be looking for. You think other people that's what they're looking for. You have to just be like, no, okay, what does it mean for God to be, for a God to be? What is it? Okay, well, it's defined as the highest being, that is the initial being, that is sentient and has its own will, and is the totality of, and is the initiator of everyone else and creator of everyone else, and is the the all-encompassing being, like an initial being. Like, that's what God is. And the highest being in a hierarchy of causality. Okay, like that, you can logically deduce that. Like, you don't need to read it in like this, in this passage of scripture or that passage of scripture, or go listen to what someone who claims to be, Hindu says is what God is. Like, you have to just look for what it would mean for God to be, and then look for evidence of that. Is sentience the fundamental nature of existence? Is existence intrinsically one? Is it initially? Do you? What is the first? What is the first? Almost, it's like you can't even say anything else. It's like, how many beings were there first? It's like, okay, one. It's like it answers itself, and that's not evidence that that's a bad question. Maybe it's evidence that it can't not be the answer. That, like, everything came from one thing, or everyone came from someone. And guess what? Like, that's true of everyone that we observed. Like, you tell me somebody that you've seen come from no one. Doesn't exist. Lizards, birds, fish, cells, atoms. Like, even at some point, yes, like there's a first cell, but I guess you have to contextualize it within probably like the model that is sentient singularity theory for that to like really extend, but beyond like the level of just cells. But at least sentient singularity theory gives an explanation as to where cells, where the first cell came from, whereas like that's not really, there's no real explanation for that in a purely materialistic model. I'm not saying that acknowledging matter is wrong. No, you have to acknowledge matter. Trust me, that's the point. Like, matter matters. That's why it's matter. Like, because you can't deny it. If I throw a rock at your head, like, you can't be like, no. Matter doesn't exist, dude. No, matter just hit you in the head. Like, and you had no choice. You can't deny it. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something that is responsible for it. But this is what it means to think, is to think about the context of things, because that is what information is. It is. And like I said, I'm writing something about it. I have models about it. If you want to see more about it also, you can check, if you go to Theory of Everyone, and you go to this video, that if you want to see more about that information change and how information is context, you can see an animated version of what I was showing you right here. It's very I basically have music to it, but we don't need the music. You can see that this is an action happening, and you can pause it if you want to read. Like, I realize it's quick, but I tried to make it the whole thing under a minute. And maybe the terms aren't the best, but you can still see like that this was. You can kind of see what I'm saying is like you have to leave everything else as is and only change one thing at a time in order to maintain coherence, because you have to maintain the context of what's happening. Otherwise, you just don't know what. If you got rid of context, you would just eliminate everything. But then there's basically it's showing that there's like two ways to change information, but they require two different perspectives. One is from within the system, and one is from viewing the system as a whole. And you can change the information simultaneously because you're looking at it as a whole. You're not reading a word letter by letter. You're looking at it as a whole. It's like the difference is like reading the term stop at a stop sign is like STOP, stop. Stop means stop. And it's like, no, when you are driving and you're an adult and you see a stop sign, you don't even read it, the letters in it. You know what the shape of the word stop is because you've read it countless times. And it's also within the context of this red, sign that is also a specific shape. And all this context is feeding into just, you don't even need to read it anymore. It's just like there's a symbol that is a total symbol there. And you're just looking at the system as a whole. That's like, this is from within the system. It's kind of relativity. It's also standard computing, binary computing. And then you have this, which is like quantum computing, and or like God's eye view. It's looking at a system from as a whole, from the outside, where you can actually view it all at once. You can't view the totality of a system from within a system. You can only view it from outside of it. That would allow you to view it as one thing. So, but the point is that in both circumstances, context is the defining characteristic of information, and you still have to follow the rules of logic. It's just, the context of your perspective influences your constraints and degrees of freedom, but it doesn't change the rules. Actually, you still have to follow. You cannot eliminate context. Context is information. Acknowledging context is thinking, and Dave did not do that in any clip that I showed, I'm pretty sure. So I hope that was interesting. But yeah, we should get off. I've watched, I think, 200. Yeah, that Professor Dave guy is incredibly pretentious. He tries to explain metaphysical subjects with his biology degree or whatever. I don't know. I don't watch it that much, but he's one of those guys that gets off on debunking people. I mean, I don't know what exactly his like motivations are, and I'm not going to speculate. I have my, obviously, like, everybody has their own like assumptions, but it's not my place to like do that publicly, and because it doesn't matter. Do you really believe string theory? I believe that the structures that they found in string theory are real, but they are the structures of mind. But I don't believe the physical. I don't believe that string theorists know what string theory is. That's what I say. Brent and his brother are wackadoos. Why? You can say that, but like that doesn't mean anything unless nobody is a wackadoo. Like, they're both married men with children and are successful in providing for their families and living a life. Like, you can't just call them wackadoos. It's idiotic to do that. I'm not saying you're an idiot. I'm saying it doesn't make any sense to just look at somebody who is, by most objective measurements, like, able to navigate the world, and just calling them a wackadoo. Anyways, I think that's it. I Glad to see you back. Great. I thank you, Marcelo. That is the comment that we should end on. I will be back next week. We are going to get back on being consistent. There are a lot of people watching right now, actually, and it's like 2 a.m. here. So, wow, I appreciate it. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. There are links below to all the streams that we discussed tonight if you want to see the totality of them, which I recommend. It'll give you more context. You can see them linked below. And with that, thank you, everybody. Peace.